Chapter 527. Most of the magic beasts in this world had two forms. One was before and the other was after evolution. Of course, there were many magic beasts that couldn't evolve in their entire lives. Ordinary wyverns were grass-green in color, while advanced wyverns were greenish-black in color. In the wyvern army sent by the Tribal Alliance, 1/3 of the wyverns were advanced wyverns, which formed a sharp contrast with the defenders of Esnearly City and the Abyssal Army. Esnearly City's high-end combat power was severely depleted, while the proportion of high-level warriors in the Abyssal Army was pitifully small. According to the records of the First World War, there would be 1 Minotaur chieftain and a dozen Minotaurs for every 100 Minotaurs. Also, this time, the Abyss had sent out more than 200,000 Longhorn demons, but there wasn't a single evil spirit to be seen. To put it bluntly, the Longhorn demons were just cannon fodder, while the evil spirits were the true main fighting force of the demon vassal races. All signs indicated that the army that appeared in the Freedom Federation was just an auxiliary force. Donald's main goal in the first battle was to destroy the magnificent Light Empire, so the elite forces would naturally be concentrated there. After thinking this through, Zhenglin's expression became a little strange. He didn't know if he should be gloating or bemoaning the state of the universe. The world became even darker. Countless wyverns had covered the entire sky. The target of the first wave of attack was the flame gogs. There were 2 people sitting on the back of each wyvern. The ones sitting at the back were the archers. They were constantly shooting left and right, desperately releasing arrows. The ones in front were the true knights. Their right arms were firmly holding onto a 7 to 8 meter long war spear. This kind of weapon was a huge test of physical strength. Most of the warriors could only sit there silently and try their best to remain motionless. They could borrow the speed and strength of the wyverns to pierce through the enemies one by one. The knights riding on the advanced wyverns could brandish their war spears without any scruples. In the distance, the formation formed by more than 300,000 barbarian bull knights had finally entered the battlefield. The entire field had been completely transformed. No matter if it was the crops, the weeds, or the trees, everything had been destroyed. The barbarian bull knights were shouting crazily and waving their spiked clubs with all their might. It was as if they didn't have a tomorrow. Training hard, fighting, comprehending, and so on. Everything was for the sake of unleashing their full potential today. The hellhounds were the first to suffer. Their formation was too dense, but the bull knights' formation was even denser. There was no way for them to retreat or dodge. In the blink of an eye, the hellhounds were trampled to the ground by thousands of hooves. However, this was not the end of it. The hellhounds continued to trample and crush the hellhounds, turning them into broken pieces and even pushing them deep into the ground. Actually, a single armored bull wasn't that scary. Any high-level warrior would be able to kill a berserk armored bull with a little bit of time. However, when hundreds of thousands of armored bulls charged together, it wasn't something that could be stopped by a human. The flame gogs noticed the wyvern knight and hurriedly changed their target. Large fireballs formed a red cloud of fire and rose from the ground. Boom! Boom boom boom! Violent explosions sounded one after another. The dark sky suddenly became bright. The intercepting firepower released by the flame gogs was too dense. Almost every wyvern that charged at the front was hit by a dozen or more large fireballs. Their hard skin that was covered with scales was instantly burnt, and holes of various sizes appeared on their wings. The explosion of the large fireballs spread to the knight and archers behind them. For a moment, countless figures and wyverns fell from the sky like raindrops. The first wave of attack launched by the wyvern army was almost completely wiped out. However, even more figures charged out from the flames and continued to approach the flame gogs. The knight was actually using their lives to exchange for time and space. Of the warriors that fell, some lost their lives on the spot. Some were heavily injured, but some immediately jumped up and threw away their useless spears. They pulled out their long swords and charged forward while shouting. If they failed, this would not only be the last battle for Nearly City, it would also be the last battle for the Horde Alliance. All the warriors knew that the winner would live, and the loser would die. Hogan saw that a large number of reinforcements had arrived. He hurriedly ordered the mages to desperately release cannon fire to provide cover for the Horde Alliance. Meanwhile, Harley was still immersed in his own world. Seeing that he suddenly couldn't absorb the fire elements, he waved his bone staff in dissatisfaction and muttered something. Boom! 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 The Flame Gogs once again released a group attack. The second-tier Wyvern Knight situation wasn't much better than their companions. Moreover, because the distance was shortened by almost 100 meters, they suffered even more attacks. At this moment, a figure shot out from the city wall. As if riding the wind and stepping on the mist, it flew straight for a few hundred meters. Then, it abruptly stopped in the air. Following that, streaks of pure white light spread out in all directions with that figure as the center. Within a radius of a few thousand meters, the warriors from both sides were enveloped by the light. However, their reactions were completely different. The warriors of Nearly City and the Horde Alliance suddenly let out thunderous roars, while the warriors of the Abyss howled. The surface of their bodies that were covered by the light was already emitting bursts of smoke, as if something was burning. The next moment, Adolph's arms had already reached towards the sky. Suddenly, a ray of light rolled in the clouds, then turned into countless pillars of light that fell vertically, forming a forest of light. That ray of light seemed to have its own life. Each pillar of light accurately enveloped every warrior. The movements of the warriors of Nearly City and the Knight of the Horde Alliance suddenly sped up. Even the wyverns were affected. Moreover, that ray of light didn't disperse and continued to envelop those warriors. The warriors of the Abyss let out mournful cries. After being enveloped by the pillars of light, their bodies were rapidly shrinking and even festering. In the end, they turned into squeaky piles of meat paste. Adolf once again released Great Blessing and Great Prayer. As a demigod, Adolf could completely control the power of magic at will, so as to avoid meaningless losses. Previously, he didn't use his full strength. Now, at the most critical moment, he showed his value in the sharpest way. Han Jean and Adolf were the only two powerhouses in the Holy Crown City who could change the whole situation by themselves. However, their methods were completely different. Han Jean preferred to find the enemy's commander and behead him directly, while Adolf preferred to help his comrades to turn the situation around. The stronger his comrades were, the more valuable he was. The Flying Dragon army was in the third, fourth, and fifth wave of attack. They were all made up of advanced twin-legged flying dragons. Obviously, the first two attacks were just a cover, and the elites of the Flying Dragon army were behind them. It was certainly not a coincidence that Adolf released all his magic at this time. After seeing through the intention of the Flying Dragon Legion, he immediately made the right decision. The blue-black wyverns quickly passed through the exploding flames and approached the Flaming Gogs like lightning. Before the Flaming Gogs could react, a snow-white forest of spears had already fallen from the sky. Flaming Gogs' dying cries rose and fell one after another. The flying speed of the wyverns was already extremely fast, and the knights were doing their best to brandish their spears. Flaming Gog was not good at close combat, so it was impossible for him to avoid the knights' attacks. Blood splashed and blood spurted out. Flaming Gogs fell down one by one, with broken limbs flying everywhere. The bodies of the Flaming Gogs became extremely fragile. Some of the knights could pierce through the bodies of several Flaming Gogs with a single thrust of their spears, and then skewer them together like grasshoppers. Sometimes, the light of a fighting technique would suddenly flash, even extending to 100 meters, and all the Flaming Gogs along the way would be smashed into pieces. In the blink of an eye, the fourth and fifth waves of Flying Dragon Knight also rushed into the battle formation. In order to capture Nearly City as soon as possible, the Flaming Gogs formed a large square formation. They couldn't support each other when gathered together, so they could only wait to be slaughtered. If there was something that could calculate the casualties caused by the powerhouses in detail and accuracy, it would find that after releasing 2 light forbidden spells in a row, the number belonging to Adolf was rapidly increasing, far surpassing that of Yelena, the chief fighter. A total of 6,000 to 7,000 elite flying dragon knights received Adolf's blessing, and their strength soared in the blink of an eye. Knights became great knights, and the combat power of a great knight was close to that of a supreme knight. This kind of enhancement was extremely terrifying. If every time a flying dragon swooped down, a flying dragon knight could kill an extra enemy, or if they were supposed to miss, but ended up hitting the enemy with a sudden increase in strength, then the accumulated number under Adolf's name would increase by thousands. In just a dozen breaths, the airspace of the flaming gogs was completely occupied by the flying dragon knights, and the battle formation of the flaming gogs was riddled with holes. They had lost the opportunity to attack as a group. One against one or one against several, the large fireballs released by the flaming gogs couldn't hurt the knights and wyverns who were buffed. However, the flying dragon knights didn't tangle with the flaming gogs for too long. Instead, they continued to fly forward, leaving the remaining enemies to the knights behind them. Their mission was to penetrate the entire battlefield. The situation of the battle was completely reversed. If the bull knights were like an unstoppable road mill, constantly crushing the Abyss army, then the flying dragon knights were like a giant sword that was thousands of meters wide, pressing forward with an indomitable will. The powerhouses on the God of War were also stunned. The combat power of the flying dragon knights was too terrifying. Although they knew that Adolf was the only remaining demigod powerhouse of the Holy See, and they also knew the power of light magic, it was far from being as shocking as witnessing it with their own eyes. Thousands of warriors whose strength was close to that of a supreme knight, what kind of power was that? Moreover, it was impossible for the great leader to be the only powerhouse in the tribal alliance. There were many leaders mixed among the flying dragon knights and bull knight. When faced with a battle of life and death, they were more willing to fight like ordinary warriors. Moreover, these leaders had been buffed by the Great Blessing spell and the Great Prayer spell, becoming abnormally powerful. The continuous blooming of dazzling light from the battle technique was their masterpiece. Under their spears, the minotaurs, the long-horned demons, and the hellhounds were all killed. Finally, the Abyss army that was coming from the rear stopped. They had already heard the earth-shattering cries of their companions being slaughtered in front of them. The 4 great demons of the Abyss were killed one after another. Leonardo did not leave any instructions and quietly left the battlefield. This caused the Abyss army to lose a unified command. The only reason they could continue to advance was because the battlefield was too large. They did not see the scene of their commander being killed, so they did not know anything. However, seeing that the enemy had launched an all-out counterattack without giving any orders, something was not right. The first to start fleeing were the hellhounds. These magical beasts had many transformations. When they met a rabbit, they would become as brave as a lion, but when they met a lion, they would become as timid as a rabbit. The roar was like an invisible electric wave that instantly spread across the entire battlefield. More and more hellhounds joined the ranks of fleeing. Following this, the long-horned demons also felt fear. Only a few minotaurs were still waving their spears in the air in vain, or trying to block the charge of the barbarian bulls. Naturally, the results were obvious. The flame gogs also wanted to escape, but unfortunately, they did not have a chance. The Wyvern Knight's charge was continuous. He dodged a spear, but when he looked up, he saw another spear coming at him. He dodged an arrow, but just as he felt a sense of relief, dozens of arrows shot at him from all directions, turning him into a beehive in the blink of an eye. In just a short moment, over 100,000 flame gogs were all devoured by the wyverns. Compared to the Wyvern Knight, the barbarian bull knight's progress was much slower. Of course, the great leader was an exception. At this moment, the great leader had already rushed to a place that made him feel despair. In front of and behind him, there were densely packed abyss warriors. Not to mention killing all the enemies, just looking at them was enough to suffocate him. But now it was useless to say anything. He could only silently swallow his tears back into his stomach and use all his strength to wave his mace. He was also silently praying in his heart. "O great God of war! If you can let me escape from this hell alive, I am willing to be your most loyal servant for the rest of my life. No. I am willing to be your most loyal servant forever." Perhaps the God of War had really heard his prayer. After an uproar, the countless abyss warriors all turned around and fled while screaming in fear. The great leader almost could not believe his eyes. Was it so effective? But he had prayed to the God of War in the past to bless him with 100 wives. Why didn't he have a single one now? Don't think so much. The great leader let out a roar and swung his mace even more vigorously. The feeling of coming back from the jaws of death and beating a drowning dog felt great. Suddenly, a dazzling saber light that seemed to be able to split the heavens and earth bloomed in front of him. Then it flashed again and again, and the blood mist that spurted out condensed into waves that rose 7 to 8 meters high. There were also countless mutilated limbs tumbling in the air. The great commander was greatly shocked. He couldn't help but slow down the speed of his spiked club. He focused his eyes in front of him. He didn't notice that the giant armored bull under him had also slowed down. The abyss warriors in front of him all fled to the sides as if they were hiding from something. Then, the great leader saw an open space in front of him. A young man wearing shining armor and holding a long saber was standing in the middle of the open space. Oh my! The great leader sucked in a breath of cold air. Only now did he notice that the ground was littered with countless broken corpses. It seemed that an extremely fierce battle had occurred here. However, there was only one person here. Did he do all of this? Could it be that there was someone else who was as brave as him? Moreover, that person was emitting a kind of pressure that was almost tangible. The smell of blood in the air was also abnormally thick. With every step he took, the tension in his heart increased. This should also be the reason why the fleeing abyss warriors were afraid and uneasy and gave up the open space. Ahem. The great leader coughed dryly and took the initiative to introduce himself so that the other party would not misunderstand. "I am the great leader of the tribal alliance, Thorn of the South. May I ask who you are?" Han Jin did not look at the great leader. His gaze fell on the barbarian bull. He had been in this world for a long time, but he had never seen a magic beast with such dense spiritual energy. Moreover, he had a vague feeling of familiarity. The barbarian bull slowly walked towards Han Jin. The great leader felt his hair stand on end. When coming into contact with an unfamiliar powerhouse, one had to be at a safe distance. Otherwise, even if they were not enemies, they would be mistaken for enemies. Stop, that guy is very powerful. The two of us are definitely not his match. Did you fucking hear me?" The great leader gnashed his teeth and whispered. The barbarian bull seemed to be very willful. It continued to walk forward, but its speed was getting slower and slower. When it was less than 10 meters away from Han Jin, the great leader could no longer suppress the nervousness in his heart. He simply jumped down and clenched his spiked club tightly with both hands. He stared at Han Jin. The barbarian bull was getting closer and closer to Han Jin. 3 meters, 2 meters, 1 meter. The barbarian bull suddenly crawled on the ground. It snorted and swayed. Then, it gently placed its head on the ground in front of Han Jin. However, its head was too big. It actually blocked half of Han Jin's body. "Little guy. It's you?" Han Jin finally recognized the barbarian bull. It had already been a few years. When the barbarian bull was tired of playing, it liked to rest its head on his or Sunir's instep. Before resting, it would always snort comfortably. Although its physique was very different from the current barbarian bull, its movements were exactly the same. Moreover, he could feel the traces of the spirit beast sacrifice. The barbarian bull suddenly raised its head. Its body was very tall. Even when it was crawling on the ground, it was still as tall as Han Jin's shoulder. When it raised its head, it was actually taller than Han Jin. Then, it turned around and revealed its belly. Its 4 sturdy hooves curled up in front of its body like a puppy. It even let out a low snort. The big leader's expression changed. Every knight in the tribal alliance had to learn how to tame beasts. They had to tame at least one barbarian bull or wyvern as their mount. He understood the barbarian bull's body language very well. The barbarian bull was covered in hard armor. It was difficult to be injured by swords and knives. Only the crease between its chest and abdomen was a fatal spot. The barbarian bull was willing to expose its most fatal spot. It was telling you that it trusted you unconditionally and without reservation. Yesterday, I had a date with a beautiful woman, so my inspiration was like a fountain. Really, I finished writing in 5 hours. It didn't even take a minute more. In the end, I played too late and slept too late. When I woke up in the morning, I had a terrible headache. I wrote for a while and then rested for a while. From 10 in the morning until now, I only finished writing 5,000 words. Compared to yesterday's efficiency, I want to cry but have no tears. Chapter 528. Leonardo was lost in thought as he gazed at the Hell's Gate. When the battle had just broken out, he had left the battlefield as fast as he could. There was no other reason than that he had sufficient reasons to shirk responsibility. For example, he could explain that he had received an urgent message from the Hell's Purple Flower and had to rush back to deal with it. If he stayed near the battlefield and avoided participating in the battle, it would be inexcusable. Moreover, his brothers and sisters were obviously hostile to him. If they seized this opportunity to make a fuss, he would be in a very dangerous situation. Several abyssal demons stood beside Leonardo. Seeing that their leader's face was somewhat unsightly, they tactfully remained silent. At this time, the body of a nearby long-horned devil suddenly twitched. Under those hard muscles, something swelled and swam. Soon, more and more bulges appeared on the surface of his body, and that long-horned devil let out a painful howl. Bang! The bulge on the right cheek of the long-horned devil was the first to explode, and clouds of blood mist blossomed one after another. Strangely, the blood mist didn't scatter, but hovered in the air and condensed into a mirror. A moment later, the figure of an abyssal devil that was completely red and seemed to be burning with flames appeared in the mirror. Most of the demons had ferocious appearances, but the great demon of the abyss was different. Perhaps it was because of his age, but he gave off a kind, benevolent, and gentle feeling. Only the sharp horns on his forehead that pointed to the sky were like 2 long swords with a domineering aura. They carried a bit of arrogance and unruliness. Leonardo had already awoken from his contemplation. He quickly walked in front of the blood-colored round mirror and knelt down on one knee. "Father, Leonardo, Lonker still hasn't passed through the Hell's Gate?" the great demon in the mirror slowly asked. "Not yet," Leonardo simply replied, because he knew that his father liked this. "So it's like this." The great demon in the mirror pondered for a moment, then said, "When Lonker comes out of the Hell's Gate, you tell him that his task is to destroy the Freedom Federation and the Tribal Alliance. Then wait for my order. Don't provoke the Holy Crown City, got it?" "Father, didn't you send Lonker here to eliminate that Raphael? How? Things have changed, haha, how should I put it?" The great demon in the mirror looked helpless. "We have overlooked a terrifying opponent. After these days of analysis, we have come to a conclusion. We have reason to believe that Raphael is a strong person from another plane." "Another dimension?" Leonardo could not help but reveal a shocked expression. "How is that possible? Father, are you joking?" "Joking? I don't have such a bad habit." The great demon in the mirror shook his head. "Raphael often uses several types of magic, and there are too many aspects of it that go against the common sense of magic. Nothing in the world happens for no reason. There must be a reason that we cannot understand, and the most reasonable explanation is that he does not belong to this realm. Father, didn't Valentine say that Raphael might have inherited some kind of ancient magic? He can only deceive a kid like you. The great demon in the mirror sneered. However, at present, Valentine only wants revenge. After Dragon City and Dragon Realm are destroyed, he won't join me as promised. He will go to the Holy Crown City. Yes. The great demon in the mirror said slowly. Even he won't believe what he said. Ancient magic is also magic, and the origin of magic is to use the power of elements to change oneself, others, or the world. All the magic in the world can be divided into these three types. Leonardo, think about it. What element did Raphael use to create thousands of clones of himself, each of which has a certain fighting ability and self-healing ability? Mirror image of water magic. Before he finished his words, Leonardo had already overthrown his own speculation. Raphael's clones were definitely not the same thing as the mirror image spell. Moreover, Raphael seems to be an omnipotent master. The great demon in the mirror paused and sighed. He can save people like a priest. There was a girl named Yelena. A few years ago, she was ambushed in the forest of holy animals and was seriously injured. It was Raphael who saved her. Raphael can make all kinds of magic props, such as a long sword that can change its size at will, a rope that can automatically track and bind the enemy, and even the god of war. They were all made by Raphael himself. I haven't seen his long sword, but I have seen the rope. It seems to have a life of its own. It's really magical, Leonardo said. That's not all. The great demon in the mirror said slowly, Raphael is an excellent magician. The fireball he releases can easily pass through the obstruction of water without being extinguished. Raphael is also a powerful warrior, just like Alquite. He can use his spiritual power to fight. Raphael is also a magical puppet master. What kind of puppet is more troublesome than the life puppet? Interestingly, Raphael seems to have his own unique way of taming animals. They once went deep into the forest of holy animals and brought back hundreds of little thunderbirds, according to the observation of the purple flower. Speaking of which, I have to remind you, Leonardo, you missed an important piece of news. Me? Leonardo was stunned. Yes, you. The great demon in the mirror smiled. You thought that it was unimportant, so you didn't take it to heart. I don't blame you, but most of the time, the key to victory or defeat lies in the seemingly insignificant aspects. If you grasp them and comprehend them, you will become the victor. If you miss them or forget them, you will fall into an irreversible defeat. Therefore, you must learn how to use your brain and learn to analyze independently. Yes, Father, but I still don't understand. Leonardo stammered. Normal thunderbirds, from the time they hatch, will mature in about 1 or 2 years. Do you know what maturity means? It means that their power has reached the peak, and they have the qualifications to roam freely. The great demon in the mirror laughed. But the god of war didn't give birth to little thunderbirds, and those thunderbirds are not as calm as mature thunderbirds. They often fight with each other, which means they are still very far from maturity. Father, is this important? Leonardo was getting more and more confused. Of course. The great demon in the mirror nodded. Thunderbirds are only level 9 magical beasts. I believe, if we can confront Raphael for a few years, you will see a group of mutant thunderbirds. They are very powerful, and may be far more powerful than level 10 magical beasts. The most convincing proof is that the leading thunderbird has been highlighted. Obviously, it has received special care from Raphael. Father, even if they become top-level mutant magical beasts, what can they do? Leonardo asked. You are wrong. I am only talking about a system. The great fiend in the mirror slowly extended a finger. An incomparably huge cultivation system that is unimaginable to us. All the abilities Raphael has are branches of that huge system. Leonardo was stunned. He stared blankly at the great demon in the mirror. He was speechless. He knew how important this judgment was. A system can't be destroyed. The great demon in the mirror slowly said, for example, if we kill all the magicians of the human race, and give them a few hundred years to recuperate, the humans will still give birth to magicians and grand magicians. Ever since the humans learned magic in the Age of Gods and created their own magic, magic has been completely integrated into their civilization, spreading to every corner. Notes left behind, lost scrolls, magic circles covered in dust, and all kinds of magic tools. All of these will become one revelation after another. Since the humans can create their own civilization, then we should also believe that they have the ability to replicate and recreate the glory of the past. I understand. Leonardo nodded vigorously. Such a huge system can't be hidden in some place, waiting for the lucky Raphael to discover it, and all the powerhouses of the past and present know nothing about it. Moreover, such a huge system can't be created by a single person. It requires the combined efforts of thousands of smart, witty, and tenacious powerhouses. After countless years of accumulation, only then can it be formed. The great demon in the mirror smiled. With so many powerhouses involved, then the secret is no longer a secret. We should have at least heard of it, right? But that Raphael has the ability to break through the restriction of the laws. At first, Leonardo didn't believe the great demon's judgment at all. He only thought that it was joking, but after talking for so long, his mentality had completely changed. This was the only reasonable explanation. I don't know. The great demon in the mirror shook its head. This is what Valentine and I are interested in. As we all know, only gods can be free from the restriction of the laws. No matter how Raphael came here, or whether he has the ability to go back, since he is here, at least it proves that he is hiding a secret that is enough to drive the powerhouses crazy. Becoming a god. Leonardo almost couldn't breathe, and his heart was beating wildly. Now you understand what I mean? The great demon in the mirror smiled. Tell Lonker not to provoke the Holy Crown City. It has nothing to do with winning or losing. A dead Raphael is worthless to us. After we control the other regions, how can the Holy Crown City stop us? It is said that Raphael is a person who values friendship very much. We have too many ways to deal with him. Now we just need to be patient. Father, but... Leonardo stuttered and hesitated on the surface, but his back was already drenched in cold sweat. What's wrong? The great demon in the mirror asked. What makes you so nervous? Raphael has already left the Holy Crown City. Leonardo took a deep breath. He has already arrived at Esnali City. What? The great demon in the mirror suddenly opened its eyes wide. Raphael has already arrived at the Freedom Federation, Leonardo said with difficulty. Where are your brothers? Why don't I see them? The great demon in the mirror hurriedly asked. They are leading reinforcements to attack Esnali City. The great demon in the mirror had already turned into a statue. After a moment, its voice suddenly became extremely gloomy. Leonardo, don't do anything wrong. Don't let down my trust in you. Father. Leonardo knelt on the ground, his body slightly trembling. I have tried to dissuade them, but Richard won't listen to me. Father, no matter what I say, Richard just won't listen to me. I really can't do anything. Of course Richard won't listen to you. The great demon in the mirror said gloomily. The kindness and kindness just now had all turned into a thick murderous intent. Or you deliberately made him not listen to you? Leonardo bowed deeply, almost crawling on the ground. Tears of grievance dripped down his cheeks. Father, no, you're too arrogant, Leonardo, you're too arrogant. The lips of the great demon in the mirror trembled slightly. I thought that letting you work together would ease the tension between you two. This is my fault, my fault. How could water and fire merge? Leonardo, I'll give you one last chance. Go find them and bring them back in one piece. Father, don't worry, I'll go immediately. Leonardo's face revealed a resolute expression, but his heart was cold. He discovered that his father's love for him wasn't as deep as he thought. Moreover, his father didn't believe his explanation at all. Did he really see through his scheme, or was he just angry at him? You guys keep a close eye on him, the great demon in the mirror coldly said. Leonardo was stunned for a moment, then understood that his father was instructing the demons behind him. His heart couldn't help but become even colder. It was said that if one's heart was as calm as a lake but his face was as calm as a lake, he would be able to become a general. This saying was a bit comical. Being as calm as a lake didn't mean that one's heart was as calm as water. Could one become a general just by being able to control one's facial muscles? No matter what kind of person they were, they had their own reverse scale. Donald was able to become the leader of the Abyss world. His strength, wisdom, and strategy were imaginable. However, when he understood that his children were in great danger, he was really confused. A long time ago, Raphael, who wasn't very strong, was still able to kill the 7 Whip brothers. This news had spread throughout the demon race. What would happen now? Therefore, Donald cruelly stripped Leonardo of his disguise. Every word was harsh, and he even gave orders to the demons. If he had a few more minutes, he might have discovered his own stupidity. Leonardo was the only demon with demon talent. If Leonardo really had any thoughts of betrayal, would he be able to stop him? Even if he really wanted to deal with Leonardo, he should have told him to do his best. If something really happened, he had to ensure his own safety first. When he lured Leonardo back, he would be a fish on the chopping board. He could cut him however he wanted. The problem was that Donald didn't think so much at this moment. Everything was based on his instincts as a father. No matter what kind of life it was, there would always be a softness, a love, and a righteousness. I'll wait for your news. Donald left behind his last words. Then the mirror shattered, and the long-horned demon turned into a pile of mud and slowly collapsed. Leonardo slowly lowered his head. His eyes were filled with confusion. What should he do? In the duel, he had blinded one of Richard's eyes. There was an irreconcilable hatred between them. Richard was always against him. He thought this was a very good opportunity. Raphael dared to leave the Holy Crown City, so he must have made sufficient preparations. Also, he had received news a few days ago that the reinforcements of the Horde Alliance were approaching Esnearly City. They would arrive by today at the latest. Considering all these factors, without the flame tyrant Lonker, the chance of the Abyss army winning was very low. Therefore, he made the decision to kill with a borrowed knife. At that time, the blame for the failure would definitely be borne by his brothers. It would be better if 1 or 2 of them died. And because he tried his best to stop them in advance, not only was he not at fault, he was even rewarded. At this moment, Leonardo finally realized that he was too naive. The so-called perfect plan needed a prerequisite. He could still gain Donald's trust. Without trust, everything would become extremely ridiculous. Sir! An Abyss demon suddenly saw Leonardo standing still for a long time and reminded him. You guys wait here. I'll go make some preparations, Leonardo said slowly. Prepare? Sir, what do you want to prepare? The Abyss demon asked. Of course, how to save those good-for-nothings. Leonardo's tone turned cold. But, do I need to explain it to you? Seeing that their leader was angry, the abyssal demons all lowered their heads. Among the several princes, Leonardo was the strongest and had been widely recognized. That was why Donald had appointed Leonardo to control the purple hellflower. It had to be known that this was the highest leader of the intelligence agency and had great authority. It could be said that he was unparalleled among the younger generation and deserved to be called number 1. Although Donald had ordered them to keep an eye on Leonardo, they didn't dare to get involved in the matter between the father and son. They turned a blind eye to it. If they really angered Leonardo, he could easily find a reason to kill them. A moment later, Leonardo appeared again. He didn't say anything and only waved his hand, releasing instant transmission. His target was Esnearly City. The abyssal devils groaned inwardly. In just a few breaths of time, Leonardo's figure had already teleported several hundred meters away. Even if they wanted to firmly carry out the order, they couldn't catch up. A few minutes after Leonardo left Hell's Gate, another long-horned demon's figure suddenly began to twitch. Following a burst of blood mist, Donald appeared again. His face had become very calm, but his lips were slightly pale. Clearly, releasing this kind of spell consecutively consumed a lot of his strength. Leonardo, on the other hand, seemed to be angry with someone. He didn't say a word and just kept using instant transmission. As for those abyssal devils, he had already thrown them more than 10 miles away. He didn't know how long he had been traveling, but when the sky started to brighten, he saw a black mass of people coming from afar. Leonardo's figure suddenly stood there, stunned. Defeated. I really lost. However, the abyssal devils must be the fastest to escape, but where are they? Chapter 529. The abyssal army had retreated. Standing on the heavily damaged city wall, Kemerake was so excited that tears streamed down his cheek. The Freedom Federation hadn't fallen in his hands. Just this point alone was enough for his name to be recorded in the annals of history, leaving behind a thick stroke of color in the history of the Freedom Federation. Honduras's face was no longer as graceful as before. At this moment, no one could hide their excitement. Yes, after this battle, Esnearly City had lost more than half of its combat power, but all the sacrifices were worth it. The abyssal army of 1,000,000 was an astonishing number, yet it had actually been beaten back. With a mere army of 200,000 that lacked high-end combat power, they had forcibly stopped the advance of the abyssal army of 1,000,000. It could be said that Esnearly City had created a miracle that no one could ignore. The entire city was in an uproar. This was an unforgettable moment for all the survivors. Countless people were running on the streets to tell each other that they had won. The common people living at the bottom were always the easiest to be satisfied. When the news of victory came, they felt that all the suffering they had suffered wasn't in vain. Even if their loved ones had died in the war, they would mourn and proudly tell others that their loved ones had done well and didn't disgrace the Freedom Federation. The people were willing to take out the food that they had saved for a long time and were reluctant to eat themselves to entertain the soldiers who had returned in triumph. The reinforcements from the tribes were also treated with the highest standard of courtesy. Even the magical beasts such as the iron-armored bulls and the wyverns were able to eat the delicious food that the people had carefully prepared for them. Those big shots who were usually arrogant and never looked the common people in the eye also uncharacteristically warmly exchanged greetings with the common people on both sides of the street. The atmosphere in Esnearly City was unprecedentedly harmonious. At this moment it was as if there was no class distinction, no distinction between rich and poor, no distinction between men and women, old and young. Everyone was happily gathered together to celebrate this hard-won victory. In the face of death, all reliance became worthless. Only in the face of death could everyone be truly equal. This was a feeling of sharing trials and tribulations. Even the incomparably honorable Chairman Honduras had forgotten to put on his airs. Of course, whether or not he would be able to enjoy the same riches in the future was another matter. The reinforcements from the swamps were clearly frightened by this enthusiastic scene. It must be known that in the past, they had only come to the Freedom Federation for one thing: war. However, in the blink of an eye, they had suddenly transformed from enemies to heroes. This disparity was truly too great, causing these simple and honest men to feel embarrassed but also a faint sense of pride in their hearts. Who would have the heart to refuse the friendliness of the common people of the Freedom Federation? Compared to the lively atmosphere in the city, Thorn's dejected figure in the south seemed somewhat out of place. The gigantic armored bull was currently shaking its head and acting coquettishly in front of Han Jin and Sunir, causing Sunir to chuckle. However, the armored bull's size caused the atmosphere to become indescribably strange. Just think about it, a creature that was much taller than Han Jin and Sunir was acting all silly. It was hard not to raise eyebrows. Thorn and Empyrean South watched this scene and felt their hearts bleed. What was this? Did I run thousands of miles just to deliver a pet to someone? How sad. It was really too sad. If this was spread out, they would immediately become the biggest joke in the swamps. However, the excited armored bull did not care about the feelings of its former owner. At this moment, it only had eyes for Han Jin. It was also very close to Sunir, who often fed it. Even when it saw Morrisons, it would still snort and greet them. However, it did not even look at Thorn and Empyrean South, who were sitting alone in the corner. Soon, a three-party meeting consisting of Esnearly City, Holy Crown City, and the Tribal Alliance was held. Each force sent several representatives to participate. Because this was a battlefield meeting, everything was simple. There were not even chairs, let alone casual meals. The meeting was held in the suburbs of the northern city of Esnearly City. In fact, it was just a meeting between several leaders. Honduras first came forward to say a few words of courtesy, then went straight to the point. Should they follow the Abyss Army closely and end this war once and for all? In the Tribal Alliance, only the chiefs of several large tribes and the great leader participated in the meeting. Hearing Honduras' suggestion, the chiefs all looked at the great leader. No. The great leader shook his head and said, "In order to support you, we have been rushing day and night. Now we are extremely tired. In order to avoid unnecessary losses, we need to rest for a few days." On the surface, it was reasonable for him to refuse, but in his heart, he was cursing loudly. Go to hell. I don't even have a mount. How can I fight? Ride on an old man like you? Yes. Hearing the great leader's words, one of the chiefs hurriedly nodded and said, "We are too tired. If it weren't for the blessings and prayers of that honorable priest, we wouldn't have won so easily. I also don't agree with the pursuit." Han Jin said slowly, "The commander of this Abyss army was originally the fallen angel Catherine. After Catherine left, Donald sent the fire tyrant Lonker here. Perhaps the fire tyrant Lonker is on the way." "My lord is right," Zinglin said. "If we really force those Abyss warriors into a desperate situation and fight to the death with us, even if we can win in the end, we will have to pay a heavy price. With the fire tyrant Lonker, our chances of winning are not very high." This was the advantage of being a leader. No matter what he said, no matter whether he was right or wrong, he would immediately be affirmed. Thorn was supported by people in Tiannan, and so was Han Jin. Zinglin and Majordomo Gale were not just for show. Seeing that both sides were against the pursuit, Honduras was a little disappointed. The atmosphere in the room also became a little stiff. Perhaps it was because he felt unbearably hot after fighting for so long, or perhaps it was because he was disgusted by the speechless atmosphere. The great leader stretched out his hand and took off his helmet. Then, he looked up at the sky and let out a long sigh. His eyes involuntarily drifted into the distance. There, his bull was playing with the beautiful female elf. How King depressing, it was fine if he didn't take off his helmet, but when he revealed his true appearance, everyone except the chiefs of the Tribal Alliance was stunned. Even Han Jin showed a look of astonishment. There was no other reason, but the great leader's appearance was very strange. It wasn't that he was ugly, but that it didn't match. At least, it didn't match his tall and sturdy figure, a pair of thick eyebrows, a pair of big eyes, and a small cherry-like mouth under the straight bridge of her nose. Not to mention men, it was rare for a woman to have such a small mouth. It was too sexy, too charming. What the F***ck are you looking at? The great leader sensed everyone's gazes and immediately swore in anger. Clearly, he had experienced many similar situations in his life. You should have grown a beard, Han Jin said with a smile. Although his words had a hint of ridicule, and it was easy to completely anger the great leader at this time, coupled with his sunny smile, it was hard to dislike him. Thorn touched his chin in Tianan, then shook his head with a bitter smile. Our great leader is only 20 years old this year. Most of our swamp warriors mature later, a chief said softly. On the one hand, he was trying to dispel the embarrassment, and on the other hand, he was trying to establish his prestige for the great leader. You're only 20 years old? Honduras was stunned again. This was too young. Raphael of the Holy Crown City was already too young, and now there was another one. Had this world become the world of young people? Are you Thorn Tianan? Kemoratsi asked hurriedly. They were old rivals, so he certainly knew the situation of the tribal alliance. It was said that a young genius had appeared in the tribal alliance. At the age of 19, he had defeated the old chief Jufan in a fair fight, and was praised as the star of hope of the tribal alliance. In the tribal alliance, people even compared him to the famous Solomon, the light of magic. Although the old chief Jufan had lost the battle to support the younger generation, and it was said that Thorn Tianan had won the battle with the help of his mount, his own strength was definitely not to be underestimated. Just now, he had been wondering why Jufan didn't appear. Since the great leader had changed, there was absolutely no one else in the tribal alliance who could convince the public except Thorn Tianan. Humph! Thorn Tianan squeezed out a snort from his nostrils, looking very arrogant. Among the representatives of the conference, he didn't care about the people of Esnearly City at all, but had been secretly observing the representatives of the Holy Crown City. That thin old man, with eyes as sharp as needles and slender fingers, should be a close combat professional. But he didn't look like a warrior or a thief. That magician in a robe, with a graceful bearing and powerful gestures, should be a person who had been in power for a long time. And damn, that guy must be more than 100 years old, right? That's too much. He's so old and still not dead? Was he the one who released the Great Blessing spell and the Great Prayer spell? Ahem. Thorn Tianan coughed a few times and said in a genteel manner, Your Excellency, I've already introduced myself. My name is Raphael, this is Mr. Adolf, this is Majordomo Gale, and this is Grand Magus Singleen. Han Jin smiled and introduced the people around him. Adolf had always been unknown, but Majordomo Gale was famous, especially Zingleen, who was regarded as the leading figures in the northern and southern magic domains together with Grand Duke Solomon. The faces of Thorn Tianan and the other patriarchs changed again and again. There was one question that couldn't be ignored. What kind of strength did Han Jin, who was surrounded by so many people, have? You don't know yet, do you? Kyle Morazzi suddenly said. The commander of this Abyss army was originally the fallen angel Catherine, but she withdrew because Lord Raphael defeated her. Hearing Kyle Morazzi's words, Honduras suddenly froze. Cheering for Raphael in this kind of situation meant that Kyle Morazzi had already declared that the Freedom Federation was no longer the Freedom Federation of the past. At the very least, Kyle Morazzi had already decided to rely on Raphael. The patriarchs of the tribal alliance had already turned pale. This news was too shocking. Thorn Tianan also opened his small mouth, and after a long time, he slowly said, Actually, I knew you were very powerful when I first met you, but I didn't expect you to be this powerful. After saying this, Thorn Tianan gave Han Jin a thumbs up. Han Jin smiled. This guy was really straightforward, without any pretense. At this time, the god of war slowly flew over from the north, and Harley's figure appeared in the air. Seeing Han Jin's group and the people of Esnearly City gathered together and seemed to be discussing something, he didn't rashly come over. He only landed beside Sunir and whispered a few words to her, then flew back to the god of war. Lich? How come you have a lich? Thorn Tianan asked in astonishment. He's just my friend, not a lich. Han Jin replied in a low voice. Thorn Tianan didn't believe him. When he was about to continue asking, he suddenly saw tall figures jumping down from the god of war, landing steadily on the ground, and slowly walking towards them in a row. It was a titan. However, the warriors from the tribal alliance had been shocked several times, and their psychological endurance had greatly increased, so they didn't find it strange at all. Dominique reached out her hand to Han Jin and said with a smile, "Sir, this is our biggest gain." 4 pure and plump magic crystals were lying quietly in Dominique's palm. Han Jin gently picked up the magic crystals and glanced at Sunir, who was standing in the distance with a smile. He knew that this kind of gift must have been planned by Sunir. On the one hand, it was an opportunity for the Titan to appear, and on the other hand, it meant that 4 tyrannical abyssal demons had been killed, which fully demonstrated the strength of the Holy Crown City, and achieved the goal of defeating the enemy without a fight. Among the strong men in the Holy Crown City, there was no lack of wise men with foresight, especially the 5-member think tank, which was composed of Guevara, Jedis, Majordomo Gale, Gao Bin and Glyn. Although the direction of this world war was not clear, and the outcome had not yet been decided, they were already planning for the future. As the saying goes, the former is the lesson, the latter is the teacher. The miserable experience of the 4 heroes in the First World War aroused their vigilance, and they would never let the tragedy happen again. Today's comrade in arms may be tomorrow's backstabbing enemy. Therefore, the Holy Crown City must steadily expand and consolidate its core control while resisting the invasion of the abyssal demons. They could even use the abyssal demons to eliminate the potential threat. Sunir was qualified to know the strategic planning of the Holy Crown City, so of course she would take advantage of the opportunity in front of her. Losing 4 abyssal demons, I think. Donald must be very sad. Glyn smiled. He had underestimated Donald. He was worried that the bigwigs of the tribal alliance couldn't see the origin of the magic crystals, so he explained it indirectly. Glyn's guess was also wrong. In fact, Donald was not sad, but extremely sad. My lord, Harley seems to have done something big. He has been bragging that he will give you a surprise when you return to the ship. Dominique continued with a smile. Really? Han Jin also smiled. A bright red light shot from the sky, and then Yelena and Bao Bao appeared in everyone's sight. With the increase of experience, Yelena had learned to pay attention to small details. In the past, she would have come directly to Han Jin and chatted with him regardless of what he was doing. But now, she just smiled at Han Jin from afar, and then landed beside Sunir. Bao Bao also put away the bright red flame, and curiously looked at the giant bull with his head tilted. The bull became nervous, snorting, and stepped back little by little. Sunir reached out her hand and gently stroked the bull's neck, trying to ease its tension, but it didn't seem to work. As a super-rank holy animal, Bao Bao was not even afraid of dragons, so how could he care about the warning of a bull? The more the bull snorted, the more curious Bao Bao became, and he staggered toward the bull. Finally, the bull couldn't bear the pressure and suddenly turned around, running toward Han Jin. "Come on, buddy." Thorn, who was proficient in animal taming, knew that the bull was afraid of the immortal bird, so he subconsciously went up to meet it. Unexpectedly, the bull twisted its body and dodged, then quickly ran to Han Jin's side. Then, it began to go crazy, constantly growling and kicking the ground with its 4 hooves, causing sparks and sand to fly everywhere. Its posture was very obvious. "Come, come, come, I'll fight you for 300 rounds." To Bao Bao, this was an unbearable provocation. It suddenly let out a high-pitched cry, and bright red flames lit up from its body again. Seeing that it didn't scare the other party, the bull immediately shrank, twisted its butt, and went to Han Jin's side, and simply crawled on the ground. It didn't care anymore. If the immortal bird really rushed over, he would have to deal with it. Bao Bao, don't mess around, Han Jin shouted. Bao Bao. Seeing this, Yelena hurriedly patted Bao Bao's neck, trying to calm him down. Bao Bao had extremely high intelligence, and he only wanted to scare the other party. Now that he had gained enough face and the other party had admitted defeat, he didn't want to continue arguing. He lazily retracted his flames, arrogantly glanced at the bull, and then shifted his gaze elsewhere. He was no longer interested in this kind of guy who looked fierce on the outside but was weak on the inside. The bull's eyes narrowed into slits, leisurely swinging its tail. It didn't care about the sight attack, it was only afraid of the destructive flames. Suddenly, a cry came from the sky, and little gold lightning sensed the movement below. To be precise, the bull and the thunderbirds on the god of war were not magical beasts in the traditional sense, but spirit beasts. Little gold lightning smelled the unfamiliar scent of its own kind, and then it spread its wings and flew away from the god of war. The bull's eyes suddenly opened and its body shook. Then, it suddenly stood up, and its gaze turned to the sky. Little gold lightning circled in the air a few times, and finally locked onto the bull. It spread its wings and shot down diagonally, landing a few meters away from the bull. Cough. Lord Thorn? Honduras tried to pull the other party's attention back. The meeting wasn't over yet. Unfortunately, it was futile. Thorn's neck seemed to have become stiff, and he didn't have any intention of turning his head. After only a few minutes, the bird and bull became familiar with each other and began to play with each other. Chapter 530. Due to the location of the swamp and their unique fighting style, the warriors of the swamp had a special affection for magic beasts. Thorn Southern Heaven could see that little gold lightning was different from the rest. What made Thorn Southern Heaven especially surprised was that the powerful Thunderbird was actually not an adult yet. This was simply an inconceivable matter. It was too miraculous. An illusion, it must be an illusion. Thorn Southern Heaven suddenly discovered a problem. That Thunderbird was similar to his own mount. The strength they possessed couldn't be linked to their age. This kind of phenomenon went against common sense. Thorn Southern Heaven, who was well versed in the habits of all kinds of magic beasts, had never heard of such a phenomenon before. More importantly, these two mystical magic beasts had some kind of connection with that young man called Raphael, especially his own mount. As long as one wasn't blind, they would be able to see that Raphael had known it for a long time. Thorn Southern Heaven couldn't help but gnash his teeth. He had gone through untold hardships to obtain his mount, but in the blink of an eye, it had become someone else's pet. Why? Han Jin naturally didn't know that it was precisely because of him that Thorn Southern Heaven was in such a miserable mood. At this moment, he was somewhat baffled as he observed this young leader. Why did he look so foolish? One of the tribe's patriarchs couldn't bear to see Thorn Southern Heaven's soulless appearance any longer. He walked to the side and whispered a few words. Thorn Southern Heaven then reluctantly withdrew his gaze. Actually, we came here for two purposes. One is to resist the invasion of the Abyss together with you. The other is so that everyone can sit together and carefully discuss the future of the Freedom Federation and the Alliance. When it came to serious matters, Thorn Southern Heaven seemed to become a completely different person. His expression was solemn as he spoke to Camarak. We should sit down and talk, Camarak agreed. Camarak agreed. Compared to the invasion of the abyssal race, the conflict between the two sides seemed to have become less important. The decades of war had also lost all meaning at this moment. Under unprecedented pressure, everyone realized that there was only one path to take, and that was to unite and face the outside world together. However, this matter was easy to say, but in reality, it wasn't so simple. Although they had repelled the abyssal army's attack this time, it did not mean that they had completely won. The crisis still existed. Thorn proposed to negotiate at this time because he wanted to occupy a dominant position in this negotiation. However, he was not the only one with such thoughts. But Kyle Morrick changed the topic. The Freedom Federation is now under the jurisdiction of Sir Raphael, so I don't have the right to decide on this matter. With that, Kyle took a step back and led Han Jin in front of him. What? Thorn couldn't believe his ears. How could this be? The patriarchs of the other tribes were also shocked by this news. After fighting with the Freedom Federation for several decades, they knew better than anyone what kind of strength their opponents possessed. Could it be that Kemeraki had gone crazy? He actually handed over such a large territory to a young man. One had to know that the Freedom Federation's wealth had always been coveted by the Tribal Alliance. This time, they had come to reinforce the Freedom Federation in order to resist the invasion of the Abyss, but they had to admit that they also wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to leave the swamp. Think about it, the Freedom Federation was the first to bear the brunt of the invasion of the Abyss race. Their military strength was bound to be much weaker than before. Under such circumstances, it should have been very difficult to refuse the Tribal Alliance's request. Or rather, they no longer had the strength to refuse. However, all of this had been taken away by someone else. The Tribal Alliance's people immediately looked at Han Jin, trying to figure out something from this young man. I don't know what happened between you all. Han Jin smiled and said, but I think that for now, everyone should put aside their grudges and join forces. You mean? Thorn's expression became vigilant. Everyone present was very clear that joining forces was naturally necessary, but the crux of the problem was how to do so. There are some things that are still too early to discuss, isn't it? Han Jin's smile seemed to contain an indecipherable meaning. Instead of everyone standing here discussing these unimportant matters, I think it would be better to think about how to deal with the flame tyrant Lonker. Han Jin's words were equivalent to the majority of the people present. Even Kemeraka's old face turned red without anyone noticing, and the Tribal Alliance's people revealed expressions of anger. So you're the only one who cares about the big picture, while we're just a bunch of clowns who only know how to fight for power. Some things could only be thought about and not spoken out loud. Everyone here was smart, so was there a need to speak so bluntly? How can you be so sure that the flame tyrant will definitely come? A tribal chief was the first to speak up. Then who do you think will come? Such a large army, it's impossible for there to be no commander. Let me think, maybe it'll be Donald. Kemerak made a show of analyzing the situation. There was no need for Han Jin to refute him. He couldn't charge at the front during a battle, so now was his chance to show off. The tribal chief was immediately speechless. If it was Donald who came, that was simply too terrifying. The tribal chief refused to let himself think about it any further. Even if the flame tyrant comes, Lord Raphael shouldn't be afraid, right? It wasn't clear if it was because Han Jin had stolen his mount, or because he was dissatisfied with Han Jin's attitude, but Thornsouth's words were filled with hostility. Did I say I was afraid? I'm just a little worried. Up until now, whenever Han Jin saw Thornsouth's cherry lips, he would have the urge to laugh. However, if he really did laugh, it would be too disrespectful. Han Jin could only force himself to hold it in. However, the slight upward curve of his lips revealed a trace of his true thoughts. Thornsouth barely managed to control himself. Lord Raphael is someone who can even defeat a fallen angel. Dealing with a trifling flame tyrant is just a small matter. That's true. Han Jin's expression didn't change at all. He was still smiling. Thornsouth was speechless. Too arrogant. Too arrogant. However, the other party had the capital to be arrogant. He could only listen. Since you can deal with the flame tyrant yourself, then what are we doing here? Let's just go back. A tribal chief couldn't help but say, if you don't know how to speak, then don't speak. Shut up. Thornsouth shouted. The invasion of the Abyss Army is a matter for the entire surface race. There's no reason for the Freedom Federation to bear it alone. What we need are partners who can share life and death with us. Remember, I didn't bring you here to be bandits who loot a burning house. If that's what you think, then *CK off. The tribal chief's face turned red from the scolding. He refuted, I didn't say anything. You think you can hide your thoughts from me? You think you can hide it from them? Thornsouth first pointed at his cherry lips, then at Han Jin. I know that you're not the only one with such thoughts, but I hope that you can set your sights further. Don't be petty like a woman. If the surface race is defeated in the end, you won't even have a single hair left. What's the point of thinking so much? So what if I'm a woman? Yelena was furious. She glared at Thornsouth fiercely. Unfortunately, this was a three-way meeting, so she couldn't just interrupt. Otherwise, she definitely wouldn't let him off. Good. Good. Han Jin stretched out his hand and patted Thornsouth's shoulder. He admired this great leader more and more. At least he didn't lose himself in the conflict of interest. Let's go. We'll talk inside the city, Honduras said in a timely manner. ************. The gates of hell, which had been silent for a long time, changed again. Flames flickered and smoke rolled. A moment later, a thick leg stepped out, followed by a black robe. Then, two straight and sharp horns appeared in the smoke. Finally, a ferocious face appeared. It was an abyssal great demon. His body was tall and burly. When he stood there with his legs spread apart, he gave off an unshakable feeling. His eyes were different from the other abyssal demons. They were dark, like a bottomless pool. However, the scythe in his hand was a little damaged, as if he had just experienced a thrilling battle. In a moment, one after another, abyssal great demons appeared one after another. They lined up behind the great demon leader, and there were more than 10 of them. One of the abyssal demons who stayed behind respectfully knelt on the ground and said in a low voice, "Your Highness, where's Leonardo?" The great demon leader glanced around and asked coldly. We've already lost track of him." The abyssal devil felt a bitter taste in his mouth. It was a mistake to let you keep an eye on him. The great demon leader sneered, and then waved to a long-horned demon nearby. The long-horned demon walked over in fear. The great demon stretched out his scythe and patted the long-horned demon's shoulder. The long-horned demon immediately understood the other party's meaning. He prostrated himself on the ground with his hands on the ground and straightened his back. The great demon leader untied his black robe and threw it to the side. Then, he slowly sat down. "How's the battle in front? Where are the princes?" "It seems to have been defeated." The abyssal demon felt that his tongue was becoming more and more uncontrollable, and it was becoming more and more difficult to speak. "Seems to have been defeated?" The great demon in the lead sneered again. The defeated abyssal army had already appeared on the horizon in the distance. Everything was self-evident. The great demon narrowed his eyes and asked, "Let me ask you, where are the princes?" The abyssal demon was tongue-tied. He wanted to say that since he hadn't seen the princes until now, they were probably dead. However, he didn't dare to say it out loud. The prince in front of him had always been known for being cruel and tyrannical. Once he really got angry, he would definitely kill him without any explanation. Moreover, he would kill him for nothing. No one would seek justice for him. "I understand." The great demon leader let out a deep sigh. His dark eyes seemed to become moist. Then, he muttered to himself, "Defeated, all defeated, why?" The great demon's head drooped lower and lower. Finally, his gaze fell on his chest. There was a ghastly wound that extended from his left shoulder to his right rib. It looked like a sword wound. If the sword had cut deeper, it would have almost cut him in half from his shoulder to his back. He didn't know when he had been injured, but the wound still hadn't healed. The torn muscles, countless blood vessels, and green and white veins made one's scalp tingle. What was even more strange was that there were countless stars flickering in the wound. It was like a miniature version of the Milky Way. Your Highness, it's great that you've come to support us. That Raphael is dead for sure. The abyssal demon pretended to be happy and shouted, Me? The great demon leader's lips curled up slightly, revealing a playful smile. I'm in such a sorry state right now. Can I still fight? Aya. The abyssal demon seemed to have just seen the other party's wound. He cried out in alarm, Your Highness, you're injured. Quick, quick, someone come and bandage my lord's wound. Just as a long-horned demon came over, the great demon swung his arm and heavily slapped the long-horned demon's face. The long-horned demon's body was suddenly lifted off the ground and flew dozens of meters away. It fell heavily to the ground and didn't move anymore. Idiot, if I could bandage it, I would have done it already, the great demon leader coldly said. The abyssal demon was given a fright and didn't dare to speak again. My lord, let us go out and find Leonardo, another great demon said in a low voice. It's useless. You won't be able to find him. The great demon leader shook his head. A bastard will always be a bastard. We should have gotten rid of him long ago. He'll come back sooner or later. The great demon who spoke had a different opinion. Leonardo is an abyssal demon. The surface races can't accept him. Where can he hide? What if he doesn't hide? The great demon leader revealed a cold smile. Doesn't hide? Could it be that he'll defect to Raphael's side? The great demon who spoke was frightened by his own guess and became dumbfounded. Leonardo was the leader of the Hell-Purple Flower. If the head of an intelligence agency defected, it would cause immeasurable damage and losses. I said before that bastard Leonardo can't be trusted. The great demon leader fiercely stabbed his scythe into the ground. But Big Brother is too indecisive. You can't blame His Majesty. Another great demon softly said, Among the younger generation, Leonardo's ability is the most outstanding, far surpassing the prince's. Otherwise, His Majesty wouldn't have let him control the Hell-Purple Flower. The great demon leader didn't refute. He only revealed an expression of pity and anger. This evaluation wasn't wrong. It could only be blamed on the princes for not being able to live up to expectations. Otherwise, why would Big Brother spend so much effort to raise a bastard? My lord, what should we do? A great demon said. Leonardo knows too many secrets. If he comes into contact with Raphael, the consequences will be unimaginable. What can we do? The great demon leader said coldly. Attack Esnearly City? My lord, we can try. Nonsense. The great demon leader said sternly. Big Brother repeatedly said that our mission is only to restrain Raphael. My lord, His Majesty probably said that because he's worried that we'll be too impulsive. Otherwise, why would he send us here? The flame tyrant Lonker is enough to restrain Raphael. Aren't we superfluous? The great demon leader closed his eyes. After a long while, he said slowly, You're right. At this moment, the long-horned demon that the great demon leader was sitting on suddenly wailed. Then, a blood-red round mirror appeared in the blood mist. The great demon leader hurriedly jumped up and turned around. He said in shock, Big Brother, you're continuously releasing. Before he could finish, he was already stunned. Donald, who appeared in the blood-red round mirror, looked extremely defeated. No one knew if it was because he had exhausted too much energy or because he was worried about the danger his children were in. Johnson, is there any news about them? Donald asked softly. Not yet. The great demon leader was stunned. He hurriedly replied without thinking. Donald's eyes flashed. Obviously, the great demon's expression couldn't escape his observation. Then, the corners of Donald's eyes drooped at a speed that could be seen with the naked eye. In just a short time, Donald looked a lot older. After being stunned for a long time, Donald changed the topic. Where's Leonardo? He's not back yet. Johnson's voice was even lower. Johnson, how should I say this? Donald said faintly. Today is a disaster for us demons. Big brother, what's wrong? Johnson's eyes widened. In his memory, he had never seen his big brother look so disheartened. I just saw Hani. Second brother is back? The mission failed. He's also heavily injured. Donald shook his head slowly as he said this. How is that possible? Johnson couldn't help but shout. Second brother brought so many people. How could he not be able to deal with Frost Dragon Ankiel? There's more than one Ankiel, Donald said softly. Shozo, Harriet, Contract, Weber of Dragon City. These guardians are all in Lost Valley. There are also many Dragon City elders. They. Johnson swallowed his saliva with difficulty. Are they crazy? Fan Lunding is attacking Dragon City and Dragonfield. Why are they in Lost Valley? They should be looking for an opportunity to integrate, Donald said. Don't forget, Frost Dragon Ankiel has a special identity. Johnson didn't know what to say. The two brothers looked at each other speechlessly. After a while, Donald broke the silence. Johnson, our morale has fallen to the lowest point. We can't go on like this. We need a glorious victory. Big brother, I understand what you mean. Johnson nodded hard. No, you don't understand, Donald said softly. I'm talking about. Chapter 531. Well done, Harley. Han Jin nodded his head slowly. This was probably the first time Han Jin had praised Harley's results in such a tone. Harley was so excited that he shook his head and smiled foolishly, unable to say a word. In the magic laboratory, dense fire elements flowed quietly, and the flashing red light gave off a sticky feeling. Han Jin slowly extended his left hand, paused for a moment, and then began to conjure a spell. The word calamity in his palm suddenly emitted a dazzling light, and the fire elements flowing in all directions seemed to be summoned, slowly squeezing over from all directions. Han Jin's expression became especially solemn. Although his heavenly apocalyptic fire was only a few fire elements away from completion, the last step was also the most crucial one. Many powerful magic weapons or life forms would be repelled by the laws of nature when they were formed. In the words of another world, it was to steal the fortune of the heavens and earth, invade the mysteries of the sun and moon, and not be tolerated by ghosts and gods. It was different from the heavenly Tao, which was tempered by the heavenly tribulations. He had already triggered the backlash of the heavens and earth, and this was the first time he had personally created a talisman that could kill gods and Buddhas. Although it was not a true magic treasure, and the scale of the backlash should be much smaller, he still did not dare to be careless. Suddenly, Han Jin's palm emitted a red light, which then turned orange, and then immediately turned golden. The light flame was retracted, and quickly collapsed into Han Jin's palm, finally turning into a thick black. The entire magic laboratory was suddenly pitch black, and only the countless crystals of ignition elements could be seen floating in the air. Harley was shocked. He looked around, but found that Han Jin's figure had already disappeared. He knew that Han Jin was creating a magic tool, so he suppressed the urge to speak and kept his mouth shut. Outside the god of war, the darkness was quickly spreading, and the biggest impact was in the city hall of Esnearly City. Kemerazzi and Honduras held a grand banquet to entertain their allies. Suddenly, the entire hall became pitch black. Everyone could see the magic lamps on the walls and the candles on the dining table, but they could not see each other. It was as if everyone except themselves had disappeared, or they had suddenly been projected into another strange world. What's going on? Honduras couldn't help but exclaim. Honduras's call was timely. Everyone heard Honduras's voice and felt a little relieved. If there was no movement for a long time, most people would probably be scared. Is Harley casting the spell? Green asked slowly. I don't smell any rotting bones, Adolphe replied. He didn't want to attend this banquet, but Kemoratsi, Honduras, and the others had invited him. Although he didn't care about their feelings, Han Jin had spoken, so he had no choice but to reluctantly come. "I've never seen this kind of magic before," Majordomo Gale murmured. "It should be, what is Lord Raphael doing?" "It's possible," Gaobin said. Garen raised his right hand and cast illumination. A spot of light flickered in the hall before disappearing. It was still pitch black. "Ha, interesting." Green couldn't help but laugh. The powerhouses found this phenomenon interesting, but the civilians couldn't. The black veil had enveloped the whole city, taking away all the light. The adults could still barely keep calm, but some children were scared. They either hid in their parents' arms or simply cried out loud. The repaired wizard towers in Esnearly City were activated one after another, but the magic circle couldn't stop the invasion of the Black Veil. Soon, the camp of the Tribal Alliance outside the city was also affected. The soldiers could see the flames on the torches, but they couldn't see any light. After being stunned for a moment, the soldiers pulled out their weapons one after another. The sound of weapons clashing could be heard in every corner. The herds of armored bulls also snorted uneasily. The wyverns spread their wings in fear, but they didn't dare to fly. They could only roar. If the Black Veil lasted a little longer, who knew what would happen? Fortunately, the Black Veil faded little by little after a dozen breaths, and light returned to the world. In the magic lab, Harley could finally see Han Jin. In such a short time, Harley found that Han Jin's face had changed greatly. A row of small beads of sweat appeared on his forehead, and his frozen fingertips were trembling slightly. "Master," Harley whispered. "It's okay." Han Jin let out a long breath, but his eyes still looked a little dazed. It seemed that he hadn't recovered yet. In Esnearly City, a figure also let out a long breath and murmured, "Is this magic from another plane?" The Black Veil was so strange that he forgot what he was going to do and that the target was just a few meters away from him. "Who is it?" A few warriors of the Tribal Alliance turned around and shouted. Leonardo smiled and rushed forward. The tip of his foot touched the back of the armored bull's waist, and the short sword in his hand swept towards the bull knight's face like lightning. The bull knight didn't dodge the attack. Instead, he crossed his hands and used the handle of his mace to stab at Leonardo's chest. However, the bull knight's movements were clearly slower than Leonardo's. As soon as the mace stabbed out, the back of Leonardo's sword had already slapped his cheek. With a crisp sound, the bull knight fell off the bull's back. Leonardo's figure disappeared and reappeared beside another bull knight. He lightly bumped his shoulder, and the bull knight couldn't help but roll diagonally to the ground. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! The first bull knight to fall on the ground roared, but his words were not clear. Abyssal demon! The bull knight's warning spread far and wide in the night. The camp of the Tribal Alliance immediately became lively. The god of war in Esnearly City also rose little by little. However, Leonardo didn't seem to be in a hurry. He took down the bull knights one by one. However, it seemed that he didn't intend to kill them. He punched and kicked them, and the short sword in his hand seemed to be useless. In such an unexpected situation, who would be the first to act? The answer was self-evident. Han Jin. He moved the fastest, and he didn't want his friends to face unknown dangers. Regardless of whether he could handle it or not, he would try his best to take it on himself. Moments later, Han Jin's figure appeared in the distance. Leonardo no longer hesitated. He turned around and used instant transmission to escape into the distance. One chased while the other fled. The distance between the two narrowed. Although they belonged to different factions and hated each other, their expressions were exactly the same. They both had a faint smile on their faces. Han Jin obviously wanted to kill the other to make up for his regret. Leonardo, on the other hand, was smiling at this moment. He must have his own reasons. When the distance between the two was less than 500 meters, Leonardo suddenly changed direction and appeared on a small hill. He then turned around and sheathed his short sword, quietly waiting for Han Jin's arrival. Han Jin's figure flashed, and he appeared more than 10 meters away from Leonardo. He was holding a flaming long sword. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, "Why aren't you running any more?" "I didn't want to run at all," Leonardo replied softly. "Is that so?" Han Jin said casually. "I like your choice." As soon as he finished speaking, he slowly raised the long sword in his hand. "You misunderstand." Leonardo's expression didn't change, but his tense body revealed his nervousness. "To be honest, I'm here to seek refuge with you." "Seek refuge with me?" Han Jin was a bit surprised. His long sword suddenly froze in the air. He then laughed. "Don't you think it's a bit funny? I have no other choice." Leonardo smiled bitterly. "You're the one who forced me into this desperate situation." "Did I force you?" Han Jin said calmly. "Do you need me to apologize? My brothers were all killed by you." Leonardo's voice became very low. I only have one life. I don't want to risk my father's anger. I'm the murderer. Your father should be looking for me. It has nothing to do with you, right?" Han Jin said with a smile. "If it wasn't for me, they would have waited for the flame tyrant to arrive before attacking. Do you understand what I mean?" Han Jin was really stunned this time. After a while, he slowly said, "You're despicable." "No, I'm already very merciful." Leonardo's expression became very complicated. "In their eyes, I'm just a despicable bastard. You don't know, no matter how many people there are around, no matter what the situation is, they'll always think of ways to humiliate me. Bastard is my name. Haha. I admit that they're telling the truth, but I have my own dignity, don't I? Also, I didn't really want to kill them. I just wanted them to have a taste of their own medicine. Who would have thought that you have such terrifying power? Even the great demon of the abyss couldn't escape." Han Jin's gaze slowly moved away from Leonardo and looked at the night sky. After a moment of silence, he said softly, "Seeking refuge with me might not be a good choice." "You mean?" Leonardo was shocked. "You should hide in a place where no one can find you. That's the only way to ensure your safety." "Haha. I'm the only one. If I hide in a corner, no one will notice me. I'll also do my best to avoid anyone's sight. When I die, the falling leaves will quietly bury me." Leonardo laughed. "May I ask, is that living? Have I really lived before?" "Looks like you don't want to be lonely," Han Jin said calmly. "If I could choose, who would want to be lonely?" Leonardo asked. "Why should I trust you?" Han Jin said. "Also, since you're brothers, why do they hate you?" "I can't answer the first question. It's up to you. As for the second question..." Leonardo was silent for a moment. "I'm indeed a bastard, and I'm too popular. Not long after I was born, I attracted Donald's attention. That's why he took me as his godson." "Just after you were born?" Leonardo fell silent again. Obviously, he didn't want to talk about this. However, if he wanted to gain Han Jin's trust, he couldn't avoid it. After a while, Leonardo slowly said, "I've never seen my real father and mother. I only know that my mother is an abyss demon. When I was born, she was already the wife of a demon warrior. So, I'm a proof, an ugly proof of betrayal. Not long after I was born, my nominal father came back and found me. Then, something happened. He wanted to kill me. That's nothing. If it were me, I would have killed the child too. But demons aren't allowed to kill each other. Otherwise, they'll be cursed by the Grim Reaper. I also have demon blood in my body. And then, he threw me into the magma. Haha. In the end, I had a lot of fun in the magma, and he was very shocked. Of course, this was just my own guess, because he should have already known who my biological father was by then, but he still wanted to kill me, and then he took me into the air and threw me down. Haha. Guess what happened?" Before Han Jin could say anything, Leonardo had already continued, I can't believe I used teleportation. God. I didn't know anything at that time. I didn't even have any memories of that period. Everything was based on my instincts. Coincidentally, Donald happened to pass by nearby and saw this scene. He stopped my nominal father. Continue. My poor father. Leonardo let out a long sigh. He must have been so angry that he even raised his sigh at Lord Donald. He must have made up his mind to kill me. He would rather be cursed. No matter who tried to stop him, they were all his enemies. Donald killed him. No, Donald only chopped off his right hand. Leonardo was silent for a moment before continuing. Although Lord Donald was merciful, this was unacceptable for a demon warrior. Not only did he lose his ability to fight, but he also couldn't wash away his shame. So, a few days later, during a clan meeting, he did something shocking. He used his scythe to cut off his own neck in front of countless people. I understand that he used this method as a final struggle, but my real mother couldn't accept this result. She also couldn't bear the strange looks of the people. A few days later, she also committed suicide. Was it Donald who raised you? You can say that. Leonardo nodded. You should be able to imagine that I didn't have a good time when I was young. Not only was I an ugly proof, but I was also an ominous symbol. I tried my best to become stronger to change their impression of me. I succeeded, but I also failed. Indeed, I gained the favor and respect of many strong people, but in the demon race they still hate me. No matter how much I did and how well I did, they still looked at me with disdain. There are some things I've been thinking about. If I could go back in time, if I had enough power, would I have refused to be born? This is a problem. It's really a problem. If that's the case, Donald must have been under a lot of pressure because of you. Don't you feel guilty about betraying him now? Han Jin asked. He had been observing Leonardo's expression. If there was anything wrong, he would immediately raise his sword and kill him. However, Leonardo's eyes were very clear. When he talked about the past, the pain and sorrow in his eyes were very real. He shouldn't be lying. Donald was only interested in my dual talents. He wanted me to become a blade in the hands of the princes. Leonardo's tone suddenly became a bit agitated. Actually, I didn't want to reject the fate that Donald had planned for me. As long as the princes treated me with a bit of sincerity and respect, let alone being a blade, I would even kneel down and lick their toes. As long as I received true recognition, haha. Unfortunately, they still hate me, especially that Richard. He actually provoked me and forced me to duel with him. That was the first time I resisted. I blinded one of his eyes. What an idiot. He was too weak, and he wanted to challenge me? Hehehe. Leonardo let out a maniacal laugh. How do you know that I won't kill you? Han Jin said indifferently. Or do you have enough confidence in yourself? A dead Leonardo is just a pile of worthless meat, but a living Leonardo can bring you many surprises, Leonardo said softly. In order to make my blade sharper, Donald gave me the purple hell flower to control. Do you know what this means? Everything about the Abyss world is no longer a secret to you. Even though Han Jin's nerves were as tough as steel, when he heard Leonardo's words, the long sword in his hand couldn't help but tremble slightly. What did you say? The hell purple flower? That's right, my lord. You must know of their existence, right? The secret of the Abyss world is indeed very attractive. Han Jin smiled, then his gaze fell on Leonardo. But I still don't understand. Since Donald gave you the hell purple flower, it means that you have superhuman abilities and intelligence. Why did you do such a stupid thing? Did you deliberately frame your brothers? Don't you know that this is far beyond Donald's bottom line? Because I lived too hard when I was young. When I rebelled against fate for the first time, it went too smoothly. I blinded Richard, but Lord Donald didn't reprimand me. Instead, he beat Richard up. From then on, no one dared to go against me. Even the princes had to give in to me. Leonardo smiled. So, I lost myself. Lord Donald was really good to me. I thought that I had enough qualifications to stand firm in the demon race. I even thought that if something really happened to the princes, I would become Lord Donald's only successor. Unfortunately, dreams are too beautiful, but reality is too cruel. Only now do I know that I'm only fit to be a shadow and can never be my true master. Chapter 532. The warriors of Esnearly City and the tribal alliance had also arrived, but they were one step slower. The powerful warriors of the Holy Crown City were standing at the foot of the hill, while the god of war was quietly hovering in the air. Although they were a bit discouraged that they only saw one enemy after making such a big fuss, they had to do something since they were already here. Mayor Snorley was about to rush up the hill with his warriors, but Gaubin said calmly, "Stop." Snorley was stunned. In the banquet just now, he had learned about Gaubin's identity, and that Gaubin's sister was about to become the hostess of the Holy Crown City. Besides, Gaubin's strength was far greater than his. He could not afford to offend such a powerful warrior. Therefore, he could only retreat with an embarrassed smile. Thorn South's eyes flickered. Although Han Jin did not bring a large number of troops, the overall strength of these powerful warriors was generally 10%, or even several percent, stronger than that of the tribal alliance. Thorn South did not want to stand out, lest he looked for trouble. It was true that many ants could kill an elephant. However, if there were other options, how could the ants have the courage to attack the elephant? Leonardo saw that the foot of the hill was full of people, but he did not panic. Instead, he continued to talk with Han Jin calmly. After a long time, Han Jin and Leonardo were still talking endlessly. Thorn South and the others felt irritated. They were chatting on the hill while they were waiting like a bunch of clowns. They did not even know what they were talking about. It was so boring. Every few minutes, Thorn Tianan would take a deep breath. Just as he was about to go down, Leonardo waved his hand and disappeared from the hill. Han Jin slowly walked down the hill. Thorn Tianan's eyes widened. That's it? Was he really going to let that abyss warrior go? The warriors of Esnearly City were also shocked. Only those on Han Jin's side could still keep calm. This was the trust formed by long-term cooperation. They knew that Han Jin must have his own reasons. Mayor Snorley, can the damaged mage tower in Esnearly City be repaired tonight? Han Jin asked. Tonight? Time is too tight. Snorley shook his head. Just do your best. Han Jin's gaze turned to Thorn of the South. Sir Thorn of the South, you should immediately discuss with Sir Kemerazzi and Sir Honduras and strive to move the barracks into the city. Han Jin's words were too direct, as if he was giving an order. This made Thorn somewhat uncomfortable, but he knew that this wasn't the time to throw a tantrum. He whispered, immediately? Lord Raphael, what happened? The Flame Tyrant has arrived, Han Jin said slowly. The Flame Tyrant is here? Snarly was shocked. How? How did they arrive so quickly? Because they built a gate to hell. The warriors of Esnearly City and the tribal alliance immediately fell silent. The gates of hell had appeared during the First World War, and it was a huge headache for the ground forces. Their carefully made strategic arrangements were always easily disrupted. Furthermore, since the Abyss warriors had set up the gates of hell here, it also showed their determination to destroy the Freedom Alliance and the Tribal Alliance. Everyone present felt their hearts sink. ********* dawn, on the city walls of Esnearly City. A soldier wanted to scoop some water from a bucket to moisten his dry lips, but just as he put his hand into the bucket, he suddenly froze. The water in the bucket, which was supposed to be calm, rippled, and in the end, the entire bucket was trembling slightly. At the same time, on the God of War, Han Jin also seemed to have sensed something. He walked to the side of the ship and looked into the distance. More and more people felt the ground tremble. It was as if countless feet were stomping on the ground at the same time. As the trembling intensified, a red light appeared on the horizon in the distance. The sky was dyed red by the light. Gradually, the scene in the distance became distorted in everyone's eyes. As a light breeze blew, everyone felt a wave of heat wash over them. Moments later, everyone realized that the red light was formed by countless creatures that looked like dwarves. Every dwarf's body was burning with raging flames. They jumped, ran, and converged into a long river of fire, covering the sky and the earth like a tide. It was as if dozens of volcanoes had erupted outside Esnearly City at the same time, and endless lava was slowly burying the entire field. Kyle Morrick saw this shocking scene through his clairvoyant eyes. He couldn't even speak. How was he supposed to fight this war? Even if these monsters didn't do anything and just ran around, the Freedom Federation would be destroyed. That was indeed the case. Wherever these dwarves stepped on, the moisture in the soil would quickly evaporate, turning into dry and cracked ground. Even the grass and trees 100 meters away were roasted by the heat waves from their bodies, causing their leaves to curl up. Han Jin also saw the torrent of flames rolling in from the distance. It seemed that these were the evil fire spirits that Adolf had mentioned, but he didn't expect to see such a shocking scene. However, he didn't see any other abyss warriors. This was normal. Apart from the evil fire spirits, almost all life would be devoured by the lava, and the abyss warriors were the same. The warriors of Esnearly City were even more useless. Before they could even get close, they would probably be roasted alive. The archers could stand in the rear and shoot arrows, but there weren't many of them, and they didn't have enough long-range firepower. If Han Jin also had hundreds of thousands of evil eyes, this battle would be much easier. Harley piloted the god of war and rushed forward. Hogan directed the magicians to adjust the magic crystal cannons. Then, hundreds of magic crystal cannons fired at the same time. Magic bullets drew a beautiful trajectory in the air and landed in the middle of the fire spirit. In the continuous explosion, the fire spirits were blown to pieces. It seemed that their defensive capabilities weren't outstanding, but the flames on their bodies didn't extinguish even after being blown to pieces. Every piece of rock was still burning with flames. The magic crystal cannons kept roaring, and the fire spirits fell one after another. However, the fire spirits didn't seem to care about the casualties of their companions. They ignored the sky full of cannon fire and didn't slow down at all. It was as if their mission since birth was to keep moving forward. Hundreds of magic crystal cannons, in the face of the endless torrent of flames, were undoubtedly a drop in the bucket. They couldn't extinguish this sea of fire at all. Hogan stood on the god of war and silently recited a spell. After a while, a whirlwind formed by snowflakes appeared out of thin air. Following Hogan's hand gesture, it flew towards the fire spirits. The fire spirits who were charging at the front crashed into the whirlwind, and the flames on their bodies were extinguished, revealing their dark stone skin. The sudden drop in temperature caused fine cracks to appear on their bodies, and they turned into a pile of gravel after running a few steps. However, the whirlwind released by Hogan was too insignificant in front of the sea of fire formed by the fire spirit. After a while, the flying snowflakes were melted by the steaming heat waves. The fire spirits that followed behind quickly filled the gap, as if nothing had happened. In contrast, Sunir and Yelena's attacks were more lethal. The arrow shot by Sunir carried a sharp whistling sound and flew hundreds of meters away before falling to the ground. It left an empty space dozens of meters wide in the ranks of the fire spirit. This arrow was at least equivalent to the simultaneous fire of hundreds of magic crystal cannons. Yelena's 10 Thunder Descent spell had been exerted to the extreme in this situation. In addition, the fire spirits only blindly rushed forward and didn't know how to dodge at all. In a flash, the fire spirits turned into countless splashes of gravel in the rainstorm of thunder and fire. But this was also the most troublesome part. These fire spirits didn't know fear and didn't have any thoughts. They simply moved forward, forward, and forward again. This meant that unless all the fire spirits were killed, nothing could stop them. Spinder and his mages were also constantly releasing magic. Because the fire magic they used didn't cause much damage to these evil fire spirits, they didn't use large-scale magic. Instead, they concentrated their magic to release the more powerful meteorite spell. Together with Gaobin, they shot down the fire spirits that had survived the bombardment of the magic crystal cannons and Yelena's thunder descent spell. The fire spirits' advance was finally stopped. The biggest contribution was Yelena. The number of fire spirits that died in her hands was almost equal to the total number of the others combined. The hundreds of magic crystal cannons on the God of War also contributed a lot. Fortunately, after getting Morgan's treasure, they didn't have to worry about the magic crystals. Otherwise, the consumption of magic crystals might cause the economy of the Holy Crown City to be in the red. No wisdom? Han Jin suddenly remembered what Adolphe had said. The evil fire spirits were completely different from other life forms. They were born in the ancient lava formed thousands of years ago, and had highly developed wisdom. As long as they were nourished by the lava, their fire of life would never be extinguished. Looking at these little things covered in flames, Han Jin couldn't associate them with Adolphe's words. Were they not the real evil fire spirits? Han Jin lifted his long saber and looked around. All he could see was the burning flames. Han Jin faintly felt that there was something hidden in the flames. However, the burning flames on the fire spirits almost sucked up the surrounding air. In Han Jin's eyes, even the nearby scenery became blurred and distorted. In this case, he couldn't see the scene in the distance. Although Leonardo had already warned him, he didn't expect the flame tyrant to attack in this way. The entire plain was burning, making him feel like a hero who couldn't do anything. Charge forward? He wasn't Leonardo. The high temperature that could burn even the air was enough to turn him into a mortal enemy. He could hold on for a short period of time, but he wouldn't be able to continue fighting after a while. Release the talisman? The fire spirits had extremely strong resistance to fire magic. He didn't know if his red lotus hellfire could cause any damage. At this moment, a 2-meter-tall flaming person rose out of the lava. Han Jin's vision was very sharp. He immediately locked onto the fire spirit and his figure flashed. Because Han Jin's appearance was too sudden, the evil fire spirit didn't have time to dodge or even react. With a bright flash of a saber, the upper half of the evil fire spirit's body flew up. After being burned for so many years, its skin had already lost its original color. It had a dark glow, and its toughness was comparable to steel. However, it still couldn't withstand Han Jin's light attack. At this moment, one after another, tall flaming people emerged from the lava like bamboo shoots after a rain. They seemed to want to surround Han Jin. However, Han Jin's figure flashed again, and he was already back on the God of War. Ha Lei activated the 5 elements Great Array, and waves of mist continuously rose. He had already grasped the Tao of mutual promotion and restraint of the 5 elements, so he activated the Water Great Array. However, under the scorching heat of the lava plains, it seemed that the 5 elements Great Array would not be able to last for too long. Han Jin's body was also covered in mist. He left in an instant and returned in an instant. He didn't stay above the lava for more than a second, but this second was enough to make him feel unbearably hot. Although the body of the evil fire spirit had already been split apart, its 4 limbs were still trembling slightly. Gradually, the 2 halves of the body slowly sank into the magma. As it was about to sink into the magma, its eyes were still staring fiercely at the God of War. Did it have to be soaked in lava to recover? Han Jin frowned. Sunir slowly drew her bow again, aiming at the place where the evil fire spirits were the most concentrated. On this special battlefield, most of the soldiers had become useless. The tribal alliance's great leader Thorn, south of the sky, and many other tribe leaders stood on the city wall, staring blankly ahead. Their ashen faces were the most effective proof of this. However, this was the time for the elves to show off their might. With an ear-piercing screech, the arrow turned into a faint black line and shot forward. However, no one expected that Sunir's fatal arrow didn't work. A large burning hand reached out from thin air and accurately caught the black arrow in its palm. Following a series of explosions, the owner of the large hand appeared in front of everyone. It was a giant about 6 meters tall. Dark red flames covered his entire body. With every breath of the giant, the flames were constantly inhaling and exhaling. Even though they were hundreds of meters away, Han Jin and the others could still feel the scorching aura. Before Han Jin could react, Baby, who was next to Yelena, couldn't hold back anymore. With a whoosh, it flew out and turned into a ball of burning flame in midair. The undying bird and the evil fire spirit were creatures that controlled the fire element and wouldn't be harmed by it. Therefore, Bao Bao didn't release any magic. He just used his body to crash into the giant, and the giant also flew into the air to meet Bao Bao. With a loud bang, the undying bird and the flame tyrant collided with each other. The two figures separated as soon as they came into contact. The only difference was that one went up and the other went down. The undying bird's body was thrown into the air. Although it quickly regained control, it could be seen from the trajectory of its flight that it had suffered some damage. The giant flame man fell into the lava and splashed a wave of fire more than 10 meters high. Then, he let out a muffled laugh. A moment later, a fiery red color suddenly appeared in the sky. Countless thick lightning pillars descended from the sky, enveloping the space within a radius of several hundred meters. 10 Grid Thunder Call. The giant flaming man roared, and the lava around him rose into the sky, forming a huge canopy that blocked the lightning. However, Yelena's 10 Thunder Descent was too powerful, and the canopy made of lava was only able to block it for a moment before it was blasted into a broken sieve. Lightning pillars flashing with golden light poured down from the cracks in the canopy and hit the flame tyrant's body. Instantly, sparks flew all over the sky. Lava shot out in all directions. Only then did everyone see that the flame tyrant's body was actually made up of huge chunks of lava. Under the bombardment of countless lightning bolts, the lava that made up the flame tyrant's body gradually began to crumble. When the lightning dissipated, the flame tyrant's severely damaged body appeared in front of everyone. There was not a single part of his body that was intact. However, he was still laughing wildly and walking forward step by step, as if he couldn't feel any pain at all. A strange scene appeared. Every time the flame tyrant took a step, a piece of lava would fly up from the flowing lava on the ground and fill up his body. After dozens of steps, not only was the flame tyrant's body as good as new, but the flames burning on his body also seemed to burn even more fiercely. Hogan took a step forward with a serious expression. He muttered a complicated incantation, and the surrounding air suddenly became cold. As Hogan waved the magic staff in his hand, the main color of the sky and earth instantly turned into a silver-white color. Frost storm. Countless fist-sized snowflakes fluttered down. At the same time, a crystal-clear ice mirror silently appeared under the giant flame man's feet and quickly spread forward. In just a few breaths, the ice mirror had spread hundreds of meters away. The sudden drop in temperature clearly caused the flame tyrant some discomfort. His advance gradually slowed down. The whistling sound of wind rang out in the air. Borrowing the wind, the snowflakes that filled the sky swirled and surged toward the flame tyrant. Later on, the trajectory of the snowflakes could no longer be seen with the naked eye. The endless pure white firmly wrapped the flame tyrant within. Suddenly, a deep roar faintly sounded from the center of the storm. The lava beneath the flame tyrant's feet suddenly began to boil. The rolling waves of fire rushed up dozens of meters into the air like a volcanic eruption. The snowflakes that filled the sky were instantly melted into countless droplets of water. Before they could fall to the ground, they were completely evaporated by the blazing flames. The mirror-like ice surface also shattered and turned into steam in the blink of an eye. The flame tyrant approached step by step with the monstrous waves of heat. Only then did everyone realize that wherever the flame tyrant went, the lava would boil. It seemed that only in this world of lava could he display his true combat strength. Hogan's face was deathly pale. He couldn't believe that the frost storm that he had unleashed with all his might couldn't cause any damage to the flame tyrant. Yelena also flew back with a dejected expression. Her 10 lightning descent also had no effect on the flame tyrant. Chapter 533. Seeing that the powerhouses of the Holy Crown City failed to gain the upper hand, Thorn South's eyes flickered. He looked back at the Wyvern Knights standing behind him. Since they came to Esnearly City, the tribal alliance had been in an awkward situation. The reason was that their fists were not as strong and powerful as others. If they could play a decisive role at this critical moment, they would be able to speak with more confidence in the future. Following Thorn South's gesture, more than a dozen wyverns spread their wings and ascended into the sky, quickly approaching the giant Burning Man. In order to avoid being burned by the lava, the Wyvern Knights maintained a certain altitude. Looking from the ground, they could only see looming black spots. The god of war was still hovering in the air. Seeing the challenge from the Knight of the Tribal Alliance, Green Zing and the others showed a helpless smile. It was good to want to destroy the enemy, but they were overestimating themselves. After approaching the giant Burning Man, the leading Wyvern Knight let out a low growl. More than a dozen knights controlled the wyverns to dive down together. The archers behind the knight hurriedly drew their longbows and pointed at the giant Burning Man. Of course, Thorn of the South didn't have the extravagant hope that a dozen or so knights would be able to eliminate the giant Flame Man. This was only a probe. If the enemy was really injured, then the Wyvern Knights of the Tribal Alliance would attack in groups. A row of arrows shot towards the giant Burning Man. The giant Burning Man didn't move and let the arrows approach him. However, the temperature around him had reached an unimaginable degree. Most of the arrows began to burn before they reached him. Only 2 or 3 arrows penetrated his body before they were completely melted. The giant Flame Man laughed wildly and suddenly raised his fist and slammed it heavily into the lava. Flames rose from the ground and soared tens of meters, even hundreds of meters into the air. The attack launched by the giant Burning Man was very similar to the forbidden fire spell, Meteor Shower. However, Meteor Shower fell from the top, while his attack came from the bottom. The dozen Flying Dragon Knight were caught off guard. In fact, even if they had been prepared, they would not have been able to block the impact of thousands of pieces of lava storm. Furthermore, the twin-legged flying dragons were only level 10 magical beasts, and their magical resistance was not high. The dozen or so two-legged flying dragons let out mournful howls one after another. The lava was as soft as a puddle of mud. As long as it came into contact with their bodies, it would firmly stick to their bodies and even burn fiercely. In just a few breaths of time, the two-legged flying dragons had already turned into fire dragons and fell from the sky one after another. The knight and archers were also unlucky. Only the 3 knights' combat strength was amazing. They let out unwilling roars and released fighting skills with all their might. The spears in their hands drew out light curtains of different colors, trying their best to prevent the lava from getting closer. The problem was that they could only protect themselves. After losing the twin-legged flying dragon, their bodies had already started to fall straight down. What awaited them below, other than the surging lava that was like an ocean, there were also countless evil fire spirits of various sizes. The roars came to an abrupt end and disappeared in the boiling lava. The dozen or so elite knight dispatched by the Tribal Alliance had not survived. Thorn South's complexion became extremely unsightly. Fortunately, he still maintained a bit of caution and only dispatched a dozen flying dragon knight to probe. Otherwise, who knew how many warriors he would have lost? Thorn South slowly closed his eyes. One of the elite knight was his childhood companion. Their voices and smiles of the past appeared in his mind. Although his companion's strength was far inferior to his own, he was still a powerful warrior widely respected in the tribal alliance. Who would have thought that he would be so easily killed by the enemy with a wave of his hand, just like a frail insect? This world would never belong to the weak. Thorn South let out a groan that only he could hear. He must become strong, must Raphael. The giant flame man suddenly let out a deafening roar. In this place, only you have the qualifications to be my opponent. Don't send those small fries to their death. Come, let me see your strength. The god of war had become completely silent. Everyone's gaze fell on Han Jin, who was standing at the bow of the ship. The warriors of Esnearly City and the tribal alliance were also staring at the god of war in the distance. This was not a provocation. With the level of the flame tyrant, a challenge issued by its own mouth could not be described as a provocation. To be precise, this was a kind of recognition. It recognized that Han Jin was one of the few people who stood at the peak of the world. You are the flame tyrant Lonker? Han Jin said indifferently. His gaze turned to the horizon and revealed a mischievous expression. Then, he lazily turned his gaze back to the giant flame man. Of course it's me. The flame tyrant Lonker's attitude was very arrogant. Other than him, who else could turn this place into a lava hell? You want to challenge me. I hope you won't regret your decision now. Han Jin flicked the tip of his blade, and a water arrow suddenly shot out from the waves surrounding the god of war towards the flame tyrant Lonker. Han Jin's figure flashed and appeared in the middle of the water arrow. The flame tyrant Lonker stood quietly in the lava, waiting for Han Jin to approach. This was not ordinary water, but the 5 elements primordial water. Harley was able to rely on his own strength to protect the giant god of war completely because of the power of the 5 elements formation. However, outsiders could not see the clues. Even the strong people on the god of war did not realize that the seemingly gentle water wave actually contained an incomparably tyrannical power. When the water arrow was close to 100 meters away, Lonker laughed maniacally. His figure suddenly leapt up and fearlessly faced Han Jin. His thick fist also smashed forward with a frightening aura. Han Jin's figure suddenly disappeared from the water arrow and appeared beside Lonker. His figure continued to shoot forward, and the long blade in his hand lightly slashed a deep wound on Lonker's waist. Lonker was injured, but he did not panic. He had already understood Han Jin's ability, and this was all within his expectations. In the next moment, he tried to turn around and attack Han Jin, but the water arrow that he had overlooked had already reached him. Boom! There was a huge splash in the air, and Lonker shot back like a cannonball. The dark red flames enveloping his body were extinguished in an instant, and countless deep and shallow cracks appeared on his black skin. Then there was another loud bang. Lonker crashed into the lava, splashing up lava into the sky. Cheers erupted from the top of Esnearly City's walls. With just one move, the majestic and arrogant flame tyrant Lonker had been defeated. The soldiers could no longer contain their excitement. Although many of the strong people knew that it would not be so simple, they still revealed joyful smiles. After about a dozen breaths of time, the flame tyrant Lonker slowly rose from the lava once more. The dark red flames had already covered his body once more. As expected, the flame tyrant possessed an astonishingly powerful life force. After stretching his body, the flame tyrant Lonker raised his head. His voice was no longer as arrogant as before, and it sounded a little heavy. You are very fast and very cunning, it's because you are too stupid. Han Jin smiled. He could understand the flame tyrant's anger. If he hadn't attracted all of Lonker's attention, it would have been very difficult for the water arrow to hit him. But what's the point? Even Donald and Catherine can't do anything to me. The flame tyrant Lonker's eyes were spitting flames as he said word by word, "You can injure me thousands of times, but you still won't be able to become the victor. As for me, all I need is one chance, that's enough. At the very least, I can make you shut your mouth forever." Han Jin took in a deep breath. "My lord." A tall evil fire spirit sensed that something was wrong with Lonker's mood and hurriedly came over. After all, their mission was to restrain Han Jin, not to fight to the death. Scram! The flame tyrant Lonker suddenly raised his leg and kicked the evil fire spirit far away. He then turned to Han Jin and roared, "Come, Raphael, fight me!" "Okay," Han Jin replied casually. He flicked the tip of his saber, and another water arrow was shot out. Just like the last time, his body shrank into the water arrow and flew downwards at an oblique angle. "This is no longer effective against me, Raphael," the flame tyrant roared. Following his hand gesture, the boiling lava around him shot up high and condensed into an incomparably thick fire python that flew towards the water arrow. The flame tyrant Lonker was surrounded by swirling lava chunks. If Han Jin used instantaneous movement to get close to him again, he would definitely be burned by the lava. Boom. The water arrow and the fire python collided. Compared to the two, the fire python's body was much thicker, but it seemed to be a little loose. Although the water arrow was small, it was incomparably tough. In an instant, the head of the fire python had turned into scattered streams of fire, while the water arrow continued to shoot down from the fire python's body, twisting the fire python into bigger and bigger flowers of fire. The flame tyrant Lonker couldn't believe his eyes. He knew that Han Jin was using water to reduce the power of the lava, but was Han Jin really condensing water elemental energy? How could it have such power? Lonker took a step back. He couldn't see Han Jin anymore, so he was a little nervous. Suddenly, the remaining half of the fire python swelled up neatly, turning into a rain of fire that covered an area of 1,000 meters. The next moment, he saw Han Jin's mischievous eyes. The flame tyrant Lonker's strength was completely dependent on his lava barrier. Other than a black dragon or the rare undying bird, no other life form could withstand the heat of the lava. However, his speed wasn't very outstanding. The moment he saw Han Jin's eyes, before he could react, the blade had already swept past his neck. The head of the flame tyrant suddenly flew into the air. Then, the blade flashed again and again. The huge head had already been turned into several pieces and scattered into the lava. The huge body of the flame tyrant also fell on its back and was soon covered by the lava that surged over. This time, it took a few minutes for the flame tyrant Lonker's body to rise from the lava. He looked up to the sky and laughed. "Raphael, I've already repeated this many times. It's useless." "I know. I just wanted some peace and quiet." Han Jin smiled. The flames spewing out of the flame tyrant Lonker's eyes suddenly paused. He then roared again. The moment he roared, Lonker's body had already leapt up. Logically speaking, the flame tyrant Lonker shouldn't have made the same mistake twice in a row. However, at this moment, Han Jin didn't have the time to think. Even if he knew that Lonker was very likely baiting him to attack, he still had to try. Adolf, who had been silent all this time, suddenly changed his expression. He opened his mouth to call out, but Han Jin's body had already disappeared. "Be careful." At the same time that Adolf warned, Han Jin's body had already brushed past Lonker's body. The bright purple blade light also quietly stroked Lonker's neck. Han Jin had been able to grow so quickly because he had comprehended blade intent. Once he attacked, he would never turn back. He would kill gods and Buddhas. He firmly believed that he could destroy all blade intent. Only when he firmly believed that he could do it would he really do it. If even he didn't believe in himself, then there was nothing much to say. Since he had an indestructible belief, there was no need to turn back. This was also why Han Jin always felt that something was missing when he was practicing with Adolf. His improvement was very slow. However, on the battlefield, even if he was facing a large group of insignificant weaklings, he could still grow quickly. This was because he could release his blade intent to its fullest extent. During the practice, he couldn't really kill Adolf and the two angels. If the action was played extremely slowly, one could see that when Han Jin's blade light came into contact with Lonker's neck, Lonker's body suddenly turned bright red. Han Jin's reaction speed was extremely fast. He immediately sensed that something was wrong, but he didn't have the strength to turn back. Before the blade was released, he could still control it. However, once it was released, his divine sense and will had completely merged with the bright blade light. As the saying went, there was no turning back. At this moment, Han Jin was an arrow. If he didn't kill, he would hurt himself. Lonker's huge head flew up once again. At the same time, Han Jin became a ball of fire that kept exploding. The people on the God of War were still in a better mood. They all knew that Han Jin had the life marionette. The warriors of Esnearly City and the tribal alliance were all dumbfounded and in despair. Facing the burning plains, the demigod expert Raphael was their only hope. Their hope was destroyed, and what replaced it was despair. Especially the old Honduras, who directly sat on the ground. A moment later, the flame tyrant Lonker's figure rose from the lava once more. He let out an extremely arrogant laugh. Ha ha! Raphael, how does it feel to be bitten by the flames? I know you have the life marionette, but how many times can you release such a magical spell? Don't rush, take it slow. Ha ha! I will let you experience what true despair is. Life marionette? On the city wall of Esnearly City, the big shots looked at each other. Honduras didn't know where he got the energy from, but he climbed up like a young man. That means, Lord Raphael is still alive. An indescribable feeling surged in the hearts of the big shot. Before this, they all had different feelings about Han Jin. Some were willing to pledge their loyalty to Han Jin, some were wary and fearful of Han Jin, and some were thinking about how to use Han Jin's power without affecting their own rights and interests. But at this moment they all had the same wish. Come out! Han Jin's figure floated away from the God of War. His expression was still so calm, as if the person who had just died was not him, but an insignificant stranger. Donald made a fatal mistake by letting you come here, Han Jin said calmly. Is that so? The flame tyrant looked up at Han Jin. This feeling made him very uncomfortable, but he had no other choice. After all, he couldn't fly. There is a bond in this world called natural enemies. When you see me, you should be like a rabbit seeing a wolf. You should hide as far away as possible, not challenge me. Han Jin waved the long sword in his hand lightly, creating a dazzling sword flower. Lonker, this is very, very dangerous for you. Raphael, you are a very interesting person, ha ha. The flame tyrant laughed loudly. He thought that he had completely restrained Han Jin. This kind of threat was too childish. I have been stalling for time because I need enough water elements. Now the game is over. Although Han Jin's voice was indifferent, it had an indescribable penetrating power, echoing in the sky above the sea of fire and Esnearly City. By the way, Lonker, did you carefully listen to today's weather forecast before you set off? Weather forecast? What is that? The flame tyrant Lonker was stunned. Ignorance is the scariest thing. Han Jin's gaze turned to the sky. Actually, even if you have listened to the weather forecast, it is useless. The ground beneath your feet and the sky have to listen to me. Han Jin's words were like scolding the entire world. The people on the God of War looked at each other. They also didn't understand what a weather forecast was. In the end, everyone's gaze fell on Zinglin and Adolf, who asked them to have such authority in the field of magic that they couldn't ignore. Zhonglin coughed dryly and looked away as if nothing had happened. Adolf still stood there quietly, his face calm, as if he hadn't heard Han Jin's words. As for what he was thinking, only he knew. Lonker, get ready to cry. A smile appeared at the corner of Han Jin's mouth. The next moment, Han Jin pointed his longsword at the sky. Wind, rise. The slightly gloomy sky suddenly began to roll, as if there was an invisible giant hand stirring the clouds. Then, a strong wind blew from the far northwest. The wind grew stronger and stronger, blowing away all the steam. Layers of creases appeared on the flowing lava. The hundreds of flags on the walls of Esnearly City were all madly fluttering in the wind. Countless evil fire spirits smelled something terrifying and raised their heads to look at the sky. The flame tyrant was no exception. At some point in time, the sky had become as heavy as the bottom of a pot. The entire world seemed to have suddenly turned from day to night. Chapter 534. Lightning. Han Jin pointed his longsword at the sky again. A thick bolt of lightning that seemed to split the sky in half suddenly bloomed, illuminating the sinister clouds. Soon after, thunderclaps rang out. Bolts of lightning flashed one after another. The entire world had turned pitch black. Other than the flickering flames on the fire spirits, the lightning was the only source of light. The storm grew more and more violent. Suddenly, countless raindrops fell from the sky like thousands of silver arrows amidst the dancing lightning. Raphael, you want to use this kind of magic to defeat me? Dream on. Flame Tyrant Lonker let out a deafening roar. Come, I'll show you the power of hellfire. The lava on the plains began to boil. The falling raindrops evaporated into water vapor before they even touched the lava. However, this was only the beginning. The rising water vapor quickly cooled down and was wrapped in the rain before falling again. No matter how powerful Flame Tyrant Lonker was, he could only stop the rain from approaching. He couldn't completely eliminate the water element. Every drop of water vapor that rose up meant that Lonker had expended a bit of energy. As the saying goes, many a little makes a mickle. The sky above the plains was completely covered in water vapor. Every minute of delay meant that Lonker had paid a huge price. However, the water vapor wouldn't disappear. Only a small part of it drifted away. Most of it would turn back into rain after cooling down. It could be said that Lonker's defeat was only a matter of time. The warriors on the walls of Esnearly City all retreated. The water vapor that drifted over was extremely hot. If they accidentally inhaled it, they would feel an unbearable pain in their throat. It was even more terrifying than poison gas. The poison would take some time to take effect. If they stayed in the hot water vapor for even a moment, they suspected that they would be cooked alive. The water vapor outside the city had already formed a pillar of air that was several thousand meters thick. The entire plain seemed to have become the crater of a volcano. Countless evil fire spirits, including the Flame Tyrant Lonker, had been completely submerged. Only pained howls could be heard. Reality proved that it wasn't Han Jin who was dreaming, but Flame Tyrant Lonker. He originally thought that it was just an unknown water element forbidden spell cast by Han Jin. After all, the water element was limited. As long as he clenched his teeth and persevered, he would be able to survive with the help of hellfire. However, the rain became heavier and heavier. In the end, it became a torrential downpour. It didn't fall one drop at a time, but in sheet. He really couldn't hold on. Lonker, if you've never learned how to swim, I suggest you pray to death. Han Jin's laughter came from the sky. Another bolt of lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating Han Jin's figure. His cloak danced wildly in the storm, but his figure stood still in the air like a nail. He held a long sword in his hand, looking like a reborn demon god. The warriors in Esnearly City could still feel a heavy pressure. Thorn wiped the rain off his face. Wasn't Raphael a warrior? When did he become a magician? However, this storm was indeed beautifully done. Extremely beautifully. Finally, the flowing lava began to recede. Of course, no one else could see it. Only Han Jin immediately sensed the change. He slowly moved and stared at Flame Tyrant Lonker from afar. He had to admit that a dispute over personal feelings was the most harmful. Han Jin's mantra could only gather clouds, but he couldn't make the clouds follow him. With his current strength, he still needed some time to gather enough clouds. If he wanted to make the clouds follow him, the energy consumption would far exceed the former. Perhaps it would be enough after he cultivated the indestructible golden armor. On the other hand, if the Flame Tyrant Lonker had immediately retreated with the evil fire spirits, Han Jin would have had no choice but to watch. There was no need for him to pay such a high price. But then again, if Lonker had been an obedient fellow, he wouldn't have disobeyed Donald's orders. However, a man lived for a breath, and a tree lived for its bark. Flame Tyrant Lonker was a powerful being in the abyss, second only to the three great leaders. He had just challenged Han Jin, but he was beaten to a pulp by Han Jin in just a few moves. If it were anyone else, they wouldn't be able to take it and would want to get back at him. Think about it, if Han Jin was beaten black and blue by Flame Tyrant Lonker in front of countless people, his reputation would be greatly damaged. Han Jin would also fight Flame Tyrant Lonker to the death. After about 10 minutes, the surging lava slowly left the rain area. The small fire spirits that had occupied the majority had all disappeared, leaving behind tens of thousands of tall fire people. The flames on their bodies had become especially dim, like piles of ashes that had yet to be extinguished. Their skin would occasionally burn, and at other times black skin would be exposed. They also walked weakly with their backs bent. Flame Tyrant Lonker walked at the end of the lava flow. He lowered his head and didn't speak, but his steps were still firm. As the monarch of the evil fire spirits, he usually considered himself a recluse, saying that he didn't want to fight for the position of the three great leaders. Otherwise, he would do whatever he wanted. Today, he was beaten so badly in front of Han Jin. Just a while ago, he was still mocking Kathleen's incompetence on various occasions. How would others mock him in the future? Suddenly, Flame Tyrant Lonker sensed something. He quickly turned around and saw Han Jin emerge from the black clouds. Although he was very far away, he could clearly see the faint smile in Han Jin's eyes. Lonker couldn't help but be furious. What was this Raphael trying to do? Was there no end to this? However, just as his anger rose, it disappeared in the blink of an eye. Flame Tyrant Lonker understood the meaning of Han Jin's words. Natural enemy. Not to mention Donald. Even if Hanny or Johnson had led a small team of demons into battle, the outcome would have been much better. The evil fire spirits were most afraid of being washed away by rain. This was also the reason why he didn't want to participate in this world war. Donald needed new land, needed to eliminate all threats, and needed to become the ruler of the entire continent. Lonker, on the other hand, didn't need anything. He just wanted to hide in the lava underground and have fun. That was his world. 10 miles, 20 miles, 30 miles. The Flame Tyrant turned around again, but Han Jin continued to follow behind him at a steady pace. It was obvious that he was unwilling to let the battle end like this. Lonker knew that as long as he showed even the slightest sign of fatigue, the battle would resume. He also knew that the reason why Han Jin hadn't acted yet was because he was afraid of the backlash from his flames. Did that mean Han Jin still needed some time to create a new life puppet? The Flame Tyrant Lonker turned around and paused for a moment before quickly walking forward. Meanwhile, the evil fire spirits gradually loosened up. They were in groups of 2s and 3s, giving off the feeling that they were a defeated army. Flame Tyrant Lonker wasn't wrong. Han Jin was indeed unwilling to give up. As the saying goes, it's better to cut off one finger than to injure all 10. Han Jin was someone who liked to cut off fingers. If he just let Flame Tyrant Lonker go back like this, what was the point of the battle? Therefore, he had been hesitating. At this moment, a line of fire emerged from the clouds in the distance and shot toward them. It was Yelena, who was chasing after them on Baby. When they were about to reach Hanjin, Yelena jumped down from the baby's back, and the baby slowly circled around Hanjin. Raphael, Mr. Adolf told me to remind you that many evil fire spirits that have advanced have the ability to counterattack. This is their talent, so you have to be careful, Yelena said anxiously. It's just that their strength is different, so the power of the counterattack is also different. But it's still very dangerous. Talent? Hanjin was stunned, then smiled. He understood what Flame Tyrant Lonker wanted to do. Yes. Yelena nodded. Baby, are you afraid of their counterattack? Hanjin suddenly asked. I don't know. Yelena thought for a moment, and her smile became sly. Raphael, you don't want them to leave? Actually, this is considered our victory. Yes, I do. Hanjin smiled. Then, I'll go and avenge you? Yelena said with a smile. Then, she waved her hand. Baby. Baby heard Yelena's call and flew over. Yelena stepped lightly and stood on Baby. She turned around and smiled at Hanjin, then raised her magic staff. 10 grid thunder call. The sky became bright red, and giant lightning pillars struck down one after another, blossoming among the evil fire spirits. Violent shockwaves rose one after another, and lava splashed into the sky. Yelena, who was gradually maturing, had fully grasped the essence of guerrilla warfare. She fought while running, and with Baby's speed that surpassed the limit, no matter what kind of strong opponent she faced, as long as the gap wasn't too big, she had the advantage. She came like the wind and left like lightning, and no one could catch her shadow. Although Bao Bao was injured, it didn't affect him too much. Furthermore, he had learned to stay away from Flame Tyrant Lonker and only focused on chasing after the evil fire spirit. All the evil fire spirits were gathered in the lava. The flowing lava river below was about 10 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide. This was too easy for Bao Bao. In just a few minutes, Bao Bao would be able to make a full circle and release the full power of Yelena's 10 grid thunder call. The evil fire spirits staggered as they ran for their lives amidst the cannon fire that soared into the sky. Every time a lightning pillar smashed down, a group of evil fire spirits would be knocked down. Some of them would be revived in the lava, while others would turn into pieces of black rock and sink into the lava, never to appear again. Flame Tyrant Lonker was both angry and anxious. When he saw Yelena appear, he already knew that something was wrong, but he didn't expect her to attack without warning. If the elemental energy of the lava was still at its peak, he would not be afraid of Yelena's magic. However, the evil fire spirits were already exhausted. In fact, it was already very lucky for them to be able to escape the storm alive. The evil fire spirits were in urgent need of rest, but Yelena was still chasing after them. This was simply adding insult to injury. Flame Tyrant Lonker wanted to fight back, but Raphael was like a silent wolf, quietly waiting for an opportunity. He didn't dare to leave the protection of the lava. Who knew what kind of magic Raphael had up his sleeves? All of the helplessness turned into an angry roar that echoed through the sky. When Bao Bao heard the roar of the flame tyrant, it immediately returned an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and a tooth for a tooth. It let out a long and loud cry. Of course, Flame Tyrant Lonker wouldn't fight with a magical beast. He turned around abruptly and ran away in large strides. At this point, he had to endure even if he couldn't. Otherwise, the evil fire spirits would suffer even more casualties. In his long life, Flame Tyrant Lonker had never been in such a difficult situation. Compared to him, Baby seemed to be very happy. It flapped its pair of fire wings to its heart's content and flew to the east, then to the west. Yelena, who wanted to avenge Hanjin, worked even harder. She cast 10 lightning strikes one after another, as if she wanted to release all of her magic power. In fact, she felt a little strange. Flame Tyrant Lonker had arrived at Esnearly City in a majestic manner, but before he could even touch the city walls, he was beaten back by a storm. Logically speaking, Lonker should be the one feeling frustrated. Where did Han Jin's anger come from? However, she didn't want to think too much about it. Han Jin didn't like Lonker, and this reason was enough. Painful times always seemed longer. Yelena didn't know how many 10 lightning strikes she had cast. Anyway, when her magic power was almost exhausted, the two parties had already run for dozens of miles. Scattered black gravel covered the ground for dozens of miles. Those were the remains of the evil fire spirits. Flame Tyrant Lonker had already closed his eyes. He didn't dare to stop or look. If he stopped for even a moment, he suspected that he would immediately lose his mind. Yelena, you go back first, Han Jin said softly. He looked somewhat disappointed. He didn't expect Flame Tyrant Lonker to be so calm. It didn't match his previous behavior. Furthermore, the flames surging on Lonker's body had turned dark red again. It seemed that he had recovered his strength. What about you? Yelena commanded Baby to fly back to Han Jin's side. I'll go take a look at the gates of hell. What are you going to do there? Yelena asked in surprise. The Abyssal race must have deployed a heavy defense at the gates of hell. You have to be careful. I'm going to verify it, Han Jin said in a low voice. Don't worry, I'll come back as soon as possible. Okay then. Yelena reached out and patted Baby's head. Baby, let's go back. Baby's body suddenly sped up and dived diagonally towards the ground. Yelena was shocked and hurriedly shouted, Baby, what are you doing? As soon as she finished speaking, Baby opened its mouth and shot out a fireball. Before it landed on the ground, the fireball had already become the size of a wheel. Then, a layer of flames expanded like a bubble, forming a semicircular light curtain about 5 or 6 meters tall and more than 10 meters wide. Then, it exploded. The rolling waves of fire swept hundreds of meters away. Countless evil fire spirits rolled, collided, and wailed in the waves of fire like pebbles. The next moment, Baby's body drew an arc in the air and flew back towards Esnearly City, leaving behind a crisp cry. Not to mention Yelena and Han Jin, who were familiar with Baby, even the evil fire spirits could tell that the cry was full of pride. Han Jin didn't cause any trouble. In the evening, he had already returned to Esnearly City. Esnearly City was brightly lit and surrounded by a carnival atmosphere. In fact, when Han Jin chased after Flame Tyrant Lonker, the people and civilians in the city began to celebrate and had been celebrating until now. The people on the God of War were also very happy. After being rescued for the first time, many people in Esnearly City still wanted to do some shady business. However, after being rescued for the second time, the big figures in Esnearly City had to think carefully. It could be said that without the help of the powerhouses in the Holy Crown City, Esnearly City would have long been destroyed. How could it be qualified to bargain with the God of War? However, Han Jin's face was a bit solemn. After returning to the ship, he immediately found Green and went straight to the point. Mr. Green, when will your magic transmission array be completed? Green was stunned and asked, You didn't seem to be in a hurry before. Why now? Leonardo didn't lie to me. Han Jin said, Near the Hell Gate I only saw evil eyes, Medusas, long-horned devils, and some flame gogs. But I didn't see any hellhounds or minotaurs. Someone took them to attack the Holy Crown City. Haven't you set up a magic array in the Holy Crown City? Except for me, no one can activate that magic array. And the magic array only protects our Holy Crown City. The other acropolises lack defense. If a large group of hellhounds spreads out, you know what the consequences will be. It will be more terrible than a plague. Han Jin said slowly, The most important thing is, who took those troops to the Holy Crown City? Didn't Leonardo tell you? He doesn't know. Han Jin shook his head. He only sensed the aura of the abyss demons, and then ran away. But, he has gone back to investigate. My lord, do you believe in Leonardo? Green asked. No. Since he betrayed his father, he has the reason to betray anyone, even his foster father. Han Jin shook his head. Then why did you let him go? He was telling the truth. Green opened his mouth. He was confused. If Leonardo was telling the truth, why didn't he believe him? Let's put it this way. Han Jin saw Green's confusion. I can use him, and I can trust him to a certain extent. But I have to guard against him at all times. Do you understand? He is definitely not one of us. I understand. Green nodded. Let's go back to the issue of the magic transmission array. Because it's my first time to set up such a huge transmission array, if there is no interference, I think it can be completed in 3 months. 3 months? Too slow. Green smiled. If you are willing to pay the price. Ho ho, I can finish it in 10 days. Price? What price? A few days ago, you killed 4 abyss demons and got 4 space magic crystals, didn't you? You need them? Of course. Do I need fire magic crystals to set up a space magic array? Why didn't you say so earlier? Han Jin took out the space magic crystals one by one without hesitation. Say so earlier. Even if I said so earlier, you can't get space magic crystals. Even Morgan's secret treasure has. Green was dumbfounded. There were 4 space magic crystals on the table, and Han Jin was still taking them out one by one. In the end, there were 11 space magic crystals neatly placed on the table. Chapter 535. Is it enough? Han Jin asked. Yes, it's enough. Green smiled bitterly. I don't need that much. I only need 5 magic crystals, and I can shorten the time to 7 days. Any more than that would be a waste. I wanted to use these magic crystals to set up a magic array, but your teleportation array is more important. Sir, how many magic crystals do you need? Green asked. 7 or 8. The more confident I am. You haven't put it into practice because you are not confident. Green was getting more and more curious. What is the name of your magic array? It's called. Han Jin wanted to say Summer Mustard Space, but Green would not understand it. After thinking for a while, he changed his words. It doesn't have a name. It's also a kind of space transmission magic matrix. The only difference is that we can freely decide the time to travel through the space. If necessary, we can even hide in the space forever. There is such a magical magic array? Green's eyes widened. He immediately understood Han Jin's intention. In the past, whenever Han Jin was in danger, he could always escape with Earthmeld and Earth Shrinking Spell. Every time he fought with the enemy, it was because the people on the God of War were in danger, and Han Jin had no choice but to fight. Since Han Jin's debut, he had never abandoned his friends to escape. It could also be said that this was the most fatal weakness of Han Jin. If the enemy could not defeat Han Jin, they would have to find a way to escape. If they could set up such a magic array, they could hide in it when they were in danger, and Han Jin would have enough room to deal with them. Han Jin smiled and did not say anything. Green was silent for a while and said, Sir, I only need 3 magic crystals. Try your best to complete it within 10 days. I'm not in a hurry, Han Jin said lightly. There are still a lot of abyss demons, right? Zhenglin was tongue-tied. Most of the masters on the continent would feel nervous or disgusted when talking about the abyss demons. Han Jin was the only exception. He had an illusion that the person in front of him was a woodcutter who was telling his family in an indifferent tone that they didn't need to worry about heating in winter because there was a whole forest behind them. Mr. Zhenglin, I remember that there are many teleportation portals in isolated Cliff City that can send mercenaries to the depths of the Holy Beast Forest. If it's so difficult to set up a teleportation portal, I'm very curious. How did they do it? The teleportation array I want to set up is different from theirs, Greenzing said with a smile. Oh? What's the difference? You'll know in a few days. Glynn smiled and changed the topic. Your Excellency, you've shown the power of our holy crown city today. Haha. You didn't see Thorn's face in the south, full of sadness, loss and helplessness, just like a sick beauty. How pitiful. Pity? Han Jin also laughed. Don't let him hear this, or he'll definitely fight you to the death. At this moment, a huge golden figure pierced through the clouds under the illumination of the setting sun and landed diagonally in the center of Esnierly City. Golden Dragon? Han Jin and Green Zinglin looked at each other and walked slowly to the side of the ship. Green Zinglin had already released his clairvoyance eyes to observe the situation in the center of the city. It was indeed a golden dragon, and on its back stood a fully armored knight. He looked to be about 40 years old, and his face was weary. The armor on his body was damaged, and only a small piece of the cape on his back was left. It was as if he had gone through an intense battle. It's him? Why is he here? Green Zinglin was surprised. Mr. Green Zinglin, do you know him? Majordomo Gale came over and asked. Of course. He's one of Nicola's trusted subordinates, Dragon Knight Dick. He's Nicola's vice-captain, Green Zinglin said slowly. I've dealt with him a lot in the past. Nicola's people? Han Jin was silent for a moment and yelled, Harley! Yes, master. Harley hurriedly jumped up from his chair. Stay here and help Dominique. We'll go back and see why Nicola sent people here. Han Jin said. Dominique had brought the Titans and magicians to the battlefield to collect the spoils. The evil fire spirit was a very strange creature. Little fire spirits didn't have magic crystals, and advanced evil fire spirits didn't have magic crystals either. Only fire spirits that had just advanced would have magic crystals in their bodies. When they truly matured, the magic crystals would dissolve in their bodies, and they would have the ability to continuously regenerate in the lava. Although the probability of evil fire spirits producing magic crystals was very low, it was better than nothing. It didn't take much effort. Sir, I won't go, Green Zinglin said in a low voice. I still need to set up the teleportation circle. Your relationship with Dragon Knight Dick. Han Jin saw some clues. Our relationship is not bad. When Nicola decided to betray me, only a few people spoke for me, and Dick was one of them, Green Zinglin said slowly. He dared to disobey Nicola's order? Didn't Nicola punish him? Han Jin asked. People used to say that Jedis and I were Nicola's most capable right-hand men, but he abandoned us. Sir, you must think that Nicola is a cold-blooded person, right? Green Zinglin's expression became very complicated. I have a feeling, sir, that you and Nicola can't coexist. Sooner or later, there will be a life-and-death battle between you two. I don't want you to make the wrong decision, so I must make it clear. Green Zinglin pondered for a moment and said, Nicola is a charismatic leader. I'm not trying to speak up for him. I'm just telling the truth. I know. Jedis has told me many times about Nicola's charisma. Han Jin nodded. He couldn't have gained the loyalty of so many soldiers just by being cold-blooded. But I don't know what to say, so I'll just talk about some small things. You can experience it for yourself. Green Zinglin said, Nicola is very tolerant of others, but he is very harsh on himself. For example, in his palace there are only a dozen maids in that huge palace. The rest are his guards. In fact, it's like a military camp. Every day, he has to train the soldiers himself. Nicola only has one queen, but she died in childbirth when she gave birth to Tinos. It's said that there was a conspiracy. A conspiracy? Han Jin was stunned. A queen actually lost her life because of a difficult birth. This is simply a joke. What are so many priests doing? Speaking of which, it's related to Jedis. Green Zinglin said slowly, Nicola's queen is called Trilinda. Nicola loves her deeply, and she loves Nicola too. But her identity is a bit special. Do you know whose sister she is? Who? Lola. Lola? The one who founded the Lola Alliance? Han Jean was stunned. Yes, Lola, Trilanda, and Louise are sisters. Green Zingline said. They are all half-elves. Lola and Trilanda had a fierce conflict because of fighting for the right of inheritance. In the end, Trilanda was the loser and was driven out. I've been in contact with Louise. You don't know, do you? Louise is now in the Holy Crown City. I can see that she has a deep-seated hatred for Nicholas. It's not normal. Louise was still young at that time, so she didn't know anything. Green Zingline laughed. Moreover, the winner will always try his best to vilify the loser. The loser is as ugly as the winner, isn't it? In the Lola Alliance, Trilanda has become the symbol of cruelty, fierceness, and viciousness. In fact, not only Lola, but also Nicola. And you have done the same thing. Me! The Holy Crown City is a very good city. It can be seen that the former Lord Dismark has devoted a lot of effort to it. Green Zingline said, but now what? At the banquet, those nobles will abuse Dismark in various ways as long as they have the chance, as if they will be more loyal to you. I didn't ask them to do that. Han Jean laughed. I know. But in a few years, Dismark will become a big villain in people's eyes. And you are the savior of the Holy Crown City. You can't deny that, can you? Han Jean sighed. The winner takes all. It was really a pity. How many years has it been since Dismark died? Green Zingline shook his head. Trilanda was driven away more than 10 years ago. In the eyes of the Lola Alliance, Trilanda has become an old witch. In fact, I heard that Trilanda was very beautiful and gentle. Maybe because of this, she was far from being Lola's opponent. Heard? You haven't seen Trilanda? Trilanda died too early. Green Zingline shook his head again. She fell in love with Nicola less than half a year after they met. They held a wedding and then got pregnant with Tinos. When Tinos was born, she died of dystocia. This love came and went quickly. Trilanda's life is a tragedy. This is not what I said, but what Nicola said. You said? Trilanda's death is a conspiracy? Although I'm not sure, I dare say it's very likely. Green Zingline said, Nicola's strength has been expanding rapidly. At that time, he had already attracted the attention of the Holy Church. On the one hand, Nicola wanted to avenge Trilanda. On the other hand, he wanted to take the opportunity to expand his territory. He tried his best to help Trilanda gather her old followers. Of course, this made the Holy Church and Lola dissatisfied. And then? No one can say for sure what happened later. Green Zingline said, anyway, when Trilanda was dying due to excessive bleeding, there was no priest in the Iron Fist City. There were only some deacons. Nicola even offered an emergency reward, willing to exchange half of the city for a senior magic scroll of light that had not expired. Not expired? What does that mean? Senior magic scrolls of light are not rare. Of course, masters who often participate in battles would prepare something to save themselves. However, on that day, it is said that Nicola released hundreds of scrolls, but all of them had lost their effectiveness. It seems that there was a supreme master hiding somewhere, imprisoning all the power of light. Green Zingline glanced at Adolf from the corner of his eye. Other than the Pope, only Adolf could imprison the power of light. What was Jedis doing at that time? Han Jean asked. Jedis was only a cardinal at that time. He was leading the priests to the unsetting sun mountains. After receiving the urgent report from the Dragon Knight, he immediately rushed back on the dragon, but when he arrived everything was too late. Green Zingline said, I don't doubt Jedis's character, but it was too coincidental. The priests had all left the Iron Fist City, Jedis was rushing to the unsetting sun mountains, and all the light scrolls had lost their effectiveness. Someone clearly wanted Trilanda to die. Moreover, it seemed that they had already predicted that something would happen to Trilanda. Then, was the difficult birth really a coincidence? Han Jin frowned. There was indeed a conspiracy. Also, the dragon realm seemed to be involved, Xinglin said. Right after Trilinda passed away, Shazos found Nicholas and asked for a marriage alliance. He wanted to introduce the most beautiful, kindest, and one of the guardians of the dragon realm, Harriet, to Nicholas. In the end, Nicholas refused. Therefore, Harriet has always hated Nicholas. After Harriet replaced Shazos, she often caused trouble for Nicholas, and even unreasonably pestered him. Haha, these days have been really lively. It's too complicated. Han Jin smiled bitterly. It seems that Nicholas's life is not easy. Nicholas tried to use other forces, and other forces also tried to use Nicholas. As for who would win, it was unknown. In any case, the Church of the Unsetting Sun was the first to be eliminated. However, if all the forces wanted to see Trilinda die, then she definitely had no chance of surviving. Thinking about Nicholas, who was an unparalleled overlord who could shake the world, but couldn't protect his wife, wouldn't he feel heartache? Of course, this was the Nicholas of the past. He had heard from Leonardo that Donald's younger brother, Johnson, had led a dozen abyssal demons to besiege Nicholas, but they were still defeated. Even Johnson was heavily injured. With Nicholas's current power, if anyone else tried to scheme against him, they would definitely be crushed and consigned to eternal damnation. Han Jin narrowed his eyes. Who didn't have regrets? He thought of Edwina. That time, during the treatment, Edwina was almost naked in front of him. After that, the way she looked at him changed. She was always sneaky, panicked, and timid. He knew that Edwina had developed feelings for him, but he already had Sunir, so he could only turn a blind eye to it. When the two vampire queens had plotted against him, Edwina should not have done anything. She should have immediately gone back to find help. However, whether or not Han Jin had deliberately distanced himself from her, she did not want to see Han Jin face danger alone, so she died. Han Jin's eyes became a little moist. A relationship that had not even started had already ended. Unfortunately, he really did not have the ability to protect Edwina at that time, just like Nicholas in the past. After Jedis took over the parish, he gave in to Nicholas on many things. Perhaps it was because he felt guilty. Although he did not know anything, Nicholas's wife decided that she should not have died in childbirth. I know very well that he sent people to investigate this matter, but they never found anything, Xinglin said. As for Nicholas, no matter how much Jedis gave in, he was not satisfied. He was always insatiable because he hated the Vatican. I originally thought that Dragon City would be the first to be destroyed. After all, Dragon City was an enemy. With the support of the Vatican and Dragonfield, he could definitely do it. But he actually started with the Vatican. Haha, this proves that he could not wait any longer. It also proves that he could not maintain his absolute rationality. Han Jin smiled. Xinglin was right. Dragon City should be destroyed first, and then Dragonfield should be destroyed by the Vatican, which was at a disadvantage in terms of high-end combat power. The Vatican would be the last. After all, a life is a life. It is not a puppet that does not know anything. It will always have feelings. Who can maintain absolute rationality? Xingling said slowly, I've heard that in the past, Nicola was very expressive. He would laugh, drink, slam the table, curse, and even flirt with women. You should ask Jedis about this. He knows it better than anyone else. However, after Trilinda's death, he became silent and rarely laughed. He would sit there for a long time without moving, but his strength was improving at an even more astonishing speed. But he is still very kind to the people around him. Nicholas would never vent his anger on others just because he is in a bad mood. Xinglin continued. Countless soldiers are willing to defend their loyalty to Nicholas with their lives. For example, let's talk about myself. Although I hate Nicholas now, I have to admit that Nicholas is a king who can make people feel warm. Unless he thinks that your existence has hindered or threatened the interests of him or the Empire, then he will show his cold-blooded side. You are wrong. This only proves that Nicholas is good at disguising himself, Han Jin said calmly. Otherwise, he is just himself. How can he show his other side? Really? Xinglin laughed. There was a topic that he and Han Jin had secretly avoided. If one day Han Jin thought that Xinglin was hindering and threatening the Holy Crown City, what would happen? However, at this moment, Han Jin and Xinglin had never expected that the test would come so fast. It was so fast that they were caught unprepared. Since you don't want to see your old friend, you can stay here, Han Jin said. Don't have any other ideas about Dick, Xinglin said. He is not that Leonardo. I've heard Jediz's and your words so many times that they've become calluses. My personal charm is far less than Nicolay's. Do you really think that I would try to influence Dick? Han Jin laughed. Looking at Han Jin's back, Xinglin also smiled. Han Jin's words made sense. Perhaps the so-called warmth was just deliberately created by Nicholas. On the god of war, Xinglin was influenced by the relaxed and cheerful atmosphere, which made him feel at ease. At the moment when Han Jin turned around, Xinglin wanted to say that he also had his own charm, which was not inferior to Nicholas. But for some reason, he could not say it. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.